We can tell a nice weather that nobody's open meetings in the nice weather.
There she is.
I go, I can see no, like goes, here she comes. That's what 2 wheels screaming around the corner.
Work at home too.
Perfect. 15 seconds
You're so
early.
funny. That's what I'm talking about.
Call the working session to order. If you will please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have a decent number of things to discuss on the agenda, working session, so we will not be making motions or voting on anything. These are simply for discussion. I know they are quite big and complex issues, so we'll see how deep we go on some of them. We do have public comment both before and after the agenda item, so if anyone would like to make public comment, you're free to come up. The microphone is on. No public comment. We will move forward. So the first issue is internet access and franchise agreements. Specifically on several of these things, I'll be a little more verbose than I have been in previous meetings because I've been working on these. Internet access and franchise agreements are something that I think everyone in the township would like to see expand. It's difficult because we have contracts. We have contracts with two companies, Comcast and Charter. And both those contracts are for 10 years. One was signed in 2019, one was signed in 2020. And as everyone knows, Comcast is the larger, and they, being a large utility company, are extremely difficult to deal with. Even if someone calls me and reports that there's a down pole or there's a service interruption somewhere, if they report it to me, because I get messages left like that sometimes on the phone without a name or number, they just report a place, and then I report those to Comcast, Comcast is horrible to deal with because I'm not the end user that's having a service issue. They don't want to respond, and I've spent hours, several times with them in the last few months trying to get something like that taken care of. I've also reached out to them in multiple different ways to try to talk to them about the contract we have with them, the service area, that type of thing. Extremely unresponsive through multiple ways, multiple different formats. They've directed me to lines that are dead and don't actually connect. I got a hold of a regional manager based out of Grand Rapids and had one good email with him, and then he was unresponsive after that. And that was based off of someone trying to get service up on Wavelake Drive in a new house that they're building. And the first response was really good. I was looking forward to having a conversation with him about what we can do, and that it went nowhere. He stopped responding after that, almost immediately. So it's been difficult to work out. I know everyone's interested in it. I've even had someone recommend that we just get better cell service, and they knew a cell company, I think it might have been T-Mobile, that was expanding in the area, and that we should reach out to them, and I did, just in the off chance that they would do something, and they also didn't respond. So even though I've looked into this in multiple ways, I have no really good leads on how to make any more progress on this. So I just wanted to bring it up as a thing. I would normally bring it up after I've made some progress, but I am a bit stuck. Questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns?
What are the other options?
The other
What are
options?
the other companies that are, besides Charter and Comcast? Is there any others that are even?
I'm not sure if there would be others that are interested, but because we have contracts with them for these areas, that would exclude the others.
Got it.
I mean, you can go to like HughesNet or something like that, but you're doing it on your own and it's extremely expensive.
But you're not like getting group or anything.
Exactly.
Wow. That's frustrating issues.
Yeah, it's a frustrating issue. It's a difficult
Yeah, I
one.
never have any problems, and if I do, I call them and they're like, phone right now.
Yeah, I have no problem if I call them directly myself.
Okay.
I've used Xfinity, Comcast
Yep.
for years now, I have no problem. But I
Yeah, I use them too, and personally at home, I do fine with them, much better than I did under Frontier, which were my two options. But nevertheless, trying to expand to any other areas seems
Well, it's
difficult
kind
to
of
say.
difficult when we're in a rural area as well. You don't have their cable laying out all over the place like you do, like Macomb County, where they're everywhere.
Right.
It's been established for a few decades now.
Right.
Here, we're still building. It's still part of the community.
Right. Yeah, it's a difficult infrastructure problem. Because it's not, at this point, it's not maintaining the infrastructure so much as putting the infrastructure in
Right.
as Dalton Township develops. And being on the edge between a place that used to be mostly rural and now is a developing place, it's going through growing pains.
Well, it's going to be difficult, especially since we have mostly the areas are off main roads. We have a lot of homes that are not anywhere near the main road, like home, like they're off dirt roads and stuff like that, farming community.
Right.
So
27 miles of dirt roads.
Yeah, so it's quite a bit. Our community, I don't think we're quite ready yet to expand in that way. I don't think we have people. We don't have, I mean, looking at our infrastructure for businesses, we're lacking in that department still.
Right.
Do we have anything for the business besides the one marijuana place I know about? Is there any more? See, so,
I've had some inquiry about some girls.
see, those kind of things are gonna hold us up.
Right.
With the money wise, because they won't even come in here, and if they do come in here, they're gonna want money. And that's gonna put a lot of burden on people right now, so I don't think we're at that juncture yet to looking at expansion yet, especially with Comcast, because they're gonna wanna run that cable, and it's not cheap.
Right. Yeah.
I've dealt with them before, and they're not cheap, just for a couple hundred feet of cable.
Right. Yeah, they don't seem interested in having a discussion. So, in the businesses that are going in, I mean, the bar opened on Whitehall, the ice cream place on 120, the marijuana place is looking at developing. Those aren't necessarily places that need a bunch of data flowing through lines anyways.
Right. Not this time, I don't think our community is ready yet, honestly.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt?
Yes, yeah, go ahead. We have a small meeting, so.
Yeah, I just want to say, we went up and talked to Greg Van Workman when he was working, he was up at the library about a month ago.
Yep.
And that was the exact same thing I said to him. I said, you think after COVID that, you know, this area has a real difficult problem with the internet, you know, and after all these kids, and you know, they couldn't go to school, and you get in these outer areas and they can't get the internet, they can't, you know, I said, you know, isn't there anything coming up in this infrastructure packages that the government is trying to push through, you know, to help out these areas? And he was just like, no, that's strictly on your township, it's your township to deal with it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
but how are you gonna deal with it? You know,
Right.
you don't have the pull or the clout to do that, to deal
Are
with
there
it. You
grants?
can't force Comcast to run lines that they don't wanna run, but yet, some of these areas you can't get people to build in because they know they can't get the internet. And, you know, people move in and then 2 years later move back out because, you know, it's a constant hassle with the cable companies, so.
Right,
Internet.
catch-22, yeah.
Yeah, so I just thought it was funny that they were like, no, that's your township's deal. I'm just like, okay.
Unfortunately, county doesn't want to get involved with something, because we are here, they're saying that we need to take care of it, and we don't have the money for that.
Well, yeah.
That's a huge
You
undertaking.
can't force them to do it, but that's what they're saying. Well, you need to get contracts and you need to deal with them that way, and it's like, you can't, you know? So,
Yeah, I mean, with the contracts being in place as they are, we really don't have a leg to stand on as far as
Right.
any type of negotiation has, because as far as the companies are concerned, we're not negotiating, we have a 10-year contract.
yep.
We're kind of locked.
10 years, that sucks. That's nice.
So it's almost more of a thing to be aware of, unless someone has some really creative solutions that I don't see. Anything else on this? We will move on to the ORV and/or golf cart ordinance. Now, I have talked to a number of different people about this. I've messaged the state police and asked their opinion on it. And the email response they gave to me is essentially that they didn't want to give a response to that. But there is some information that I put in here from the Michigan Municipal League. And they specifically do address the issue and address several of the things that we're interested in, such as in the Michigan Vehicle Code, an operator must be at least 16 years of age and have a valid driver's license and those types of things. And it does seem that an ORV or an ATV ordinance should probably be different than a golf cart ordinance.
Definitely.
Which I was thinking at first that would make sense, and it looks like, I haven't found anywhere that it was combined anyways, not that I've found too many places, but a handful, but I haven't found where it's combined. So probably two separate ordinances we're actually looking at.
Yeah, because I've seen ORVs, they can go well over 60 miles an hour. So that's-
Well, I've been riding the motorcycle, the previous motorcycle I had, on a highway, slightly over highway speeds, coming north on 31 from Grand Haven, and I was passed by a little yellow scooter before, so. Yeah. Took a triple take at that.
They're out there too.
Little guy with a backpack, bright yellow scooter. So, yeah, they definitely do soup some things up and they get moving, and ORVs and ATVs are on that same level. So I think it makes sense to look at the issues almost separately, and they would be mostly used probably in separate areas. Golf carts are
Not off-road typically.
in the places where houses are close together, yeah. Kind of.
Typically, what I've seen within our communities, like within, around the lake area in particular, is where mostly where you see golf carts being used.
Right.
People that live out there will use them to go to visit their friends down at the side of the lake, around the lake. So that's where we've actually encountered what we used to have a golf cart, until we saw that it's against the law, so we sold ours. So, but yeah, that's what people want it for. Instead of having to get in a car, it's a nice day out. Let's just take the golf cart, go over to go see Randy real quick, see how they're doing, type of things like that. So that's what you're usually dealing with. It's around the lake, or the lake shore especially. And why not with, some of these other people that are living down the road, if they have a golf cart, want to go down the road, the dirt road, go see their neighbor or friends down the road. If it's not above 35 miles an hour, why couldn't they go? I can ride a bike on the side of the road, because I'm a freeway, so why not we'll grab a golf cart?
Exactly. Well, I'm in the Village of Lakewood Club, and automobile is 40 miles an hour. And so one of these right here says, only permitted to operate on streets that are 30 mile per hour or less. And I see people on automobile road with carts, and it's at 40 mile an hour. So, but they're doing it,
Right, yeah, there's definitely a balance here in trying to enforce laws as they are, and then also trying to adjust laws to incorporate the behavior that is actually shown in the culture. And there's a major balancing act between those two. There definitely has to be some sort of limit, because we don't want golf carts going down 120.
Right.
No, right.
That's going to be extremely
That's
dangerous.
gonna be a bad thing.
So yellow.
And I know that some of these are probably owing to, they are owing to Public Act 491 of 2014, so some of them are going to be some stuff according to state law. This was referenced to me from Sheriff Poulin, and I talked to him a couple of different times about this. Specifically, I emailed him on if we should even have one. If the ORVs or ATVs or golf carts are already following state laws and have a sticker through them and stuff, should we have one? And that was the point at which the Michigan State Police said they didn't want to comment, and the sheriff sent me this from the Michigan Municipal League to reference and look into.
Yeah, I think we definitely need to have something in the ordinances, because we have actually known some people that took their golf cart. They live across over on West Lake, and they have lake access across the street, and they have their boat dock out there. So they have to cross the street in order to get to the dock, okay? And they've actually had the DNR pull them over and give them a citation because they drove a golf cart across the street, because there's nothing saying that they can do that. So they got cited. I'm not sure what the amount was, but this is one of the reasons why we spoke up about it, because there have been other people that have had this happen to them, and it doesn't make sense for something so minuscule just to go across the street.
Right.
So, and we know other communities that do have golf carts out there, that is perfectly legal, so that's why we would like to see this go forward, because there are people, like she said, that are using golf carts already. we want to make sure that they're using it in such a legal way and not illegal, and that they're not getting cited for something that they should be able to do already on their own.
Right.
So we need to adopt something there for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. The age limit,
Yeah.
I think is interesting, because they do have different provisions for going down to 12 years old. Now, I've been pulled over on an ATV when I was 10 or 12, something like that, in the middle of nowhere in the UP, and escorted home by the police. I had an aunt and uncles up there. It was quite a while ago, obviously, but it was interesting, and at the time, I thought it was ridiculous. I was fine with riding four-wheelers and that type of thing. But now, at this point in my life, I think that a 12-year-old being out on a vehicle by themselves is not good. This specifically has provisions for a licensed driver being with them, like if they're in a golf cart or something like that. I think that's reasonable. But I think that's definitely something to look at being stricter on, are the age limits. I think the idea of a licensed driver driving on a road is reasonable. If you're not a licensed driver, you couldn't drive a vehicle down the road, a car down the road, a motorcycle down the road. So should you be able to drive a different vehicle down the road?
It's true.
It just seems like it'd be a little safer.
Well, the thing is, we can't put in an ordinance in place that is contrary to what the state says.
Right, we
So,
can't
We
be-
can't put in an ordinance that says you can be 10 years old and drive
We can't be less strict in them, but we could be more
We
strict.
could be more strict, but we can't be less strict.
Right.
And yeah, because, if somebody gets pulled over by a sheriff, he could say, well, my ordinance says, and he's gonna say, I don't care about your ordinance. This is what the state says.
Right.
So we just need to make sure that we're.
Exactly.
Right, you're on a state road and
Yep,
therefore you need a
exactly,
license.
exactly. We just make sure our ordinances aren't contrary to what the state is.
That said, why would our friend have gotten $100 ticket for crossing the street?
They should have probably taken that
To
and
court.
fought it, because that absolutely, I'm reading this and I'm
Because we
thinking,
don't
why
have
would
an
we?
ordinance.
Yeah, but
That's
the
why they
state,
got pulled over.
yeah, but it,
It doesn't matter.
no.
We don't have an ordinance.
Right.
That's why
They have to
have,
supersede through.
Right, we live
Just the
across
same
from
thing,
it too.
if I may, did you,
Yeah, go
is
ahead.
this part on halfway down, is this something you wrote as our ordinance, because it refers to Dalton Township?
The LSV,
On page 14, I'm assuming where it is, 14, 15, of that packet you sent out?
the LSV, the low-speed vehicle one that references Dalton, is not something that I wrote.
Correct, right.
I can't remember exactly where it came
The only
from.
reason I'm saying that.
Didn't one of the
is
knights
it
pass
says-
it on to me? I got it from somebody sent it to me.
Well, the only reason I'm bringing it up is it says under I, prohibit on a state road, does not prohibit a person from crossing a state road and operating an LSV on a street or in the village or the township, yada, yada, yada. They not cross any roadway with a boat speed limit of exceeding 45 miles an hour. That means they cannot be on White Lake Drive, they cannot be on Blue Lake Road, they cannot be on any of those major, on Staple, any of those are all 45 or higher.
Right.
So you're gonna limit to where you're allowed, and these people can't cross the road. It says cannot cross. So,
It's like, it's not even, I don't even think it's 30 in there.
it isn't, but if you live on the lake, just right behind me, and I watched them come out of Lake Shore, off of Lake Shore, and run down White Lake, or Blue Lake Road. And it's
Right.
55 miles an hour after the curve. And it's 55 all the way up to out of our township. White Lake Drive's 55,
Right.
and I've seen them on there. I mean, again,
So it's Lakewood.
it is what it is. I mean, I'm not complaining, I'm saying, if
We
you're
just
gonna
need to
think
make
about
sure.
this, you need to think about that limit, you know, that, again, I don't see a golf cart, obviously there's a few of them, and ORV is obviously different than a golf cart. I'm more comfortable with the golf carts than I am with the ORVs personally. We've had more ORV wrecks than we've had we've had golf carts.
Right.
In my own personal, in our experience in the organization, we've had more of those, because those are guys who are going out being wild and crazy, and
Sure.
two-tracking and jumping across two tracks and coming across major roads and coming off of Lakewood in the back of the two tracks out there on our township property, and then shooting across automobile and not paying attention and getting smoked.
Okay, yeah.
But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, that makes sense though. Did you have something? Did you raise your hand? Make sure. All right. Well, yeah, we'll have to look at separating the two ordinances, I think if we build them off of that Michigan Municipal League, those recommended ordinances, I think it makes sense. We've obviously encountered a bunch of problems, figured them out, tried to adjust them over time. So if we build them off the back of that, we should be on pretty stable ground. Does anyone have anything else?
I think we're on the right track with this. We're looking at the other areas around us
Right.
and adopting what they have. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a Holton one? I thought I saw a Holton.
In the previous packet, I included Holton's ORV ordinance and North Muskegon, the city of North Muskegon, their golf cart ordinance. Yeah.
Because I thought those ones looked reasonable.
Yeah.
And I was looking at them, and they pretty much are following what we got from the Michigan Municipal League too, so.
All right, next, trucking ordinance. So the trucking ordinance, there's really two issues with it now. When we first started discussion, there might have been one about the roads that were limited. But the other issue that has come up is that if the planning commission is looking at something like a special use, where there's going to be trucking at the location, and that's not on a road that's part of the truck route, then there's a discrepancy there. Now, you can go to and from a location that's like a residence where you're doing a temporary thing, and you can go to and from a location of business where they're parking the trucks overnight. But if you're going to and from a location of business where they're not parking the trucks overnight, then you probably need a special permit from me for the 10 days. And if you're doing that over a location that you specifically have a business activity occurring at, that's difficult to work out. The planning commission cannot technically make an exemption to that as part of their review process and the special use process, because the trucking ordinance is a general regulatory ordinance, not a zoning ordinance. So technically, the planning commission does not have jurisdiction over it. And we could make that referential so that in the general regulatory ordinance for trucking, we say that the planning commission, when they're doing their site review, when they're looking at a special use, can go through and look at, with the road commission, what route would make sense for trucks to take. And that would kind of solidify that and make the system work, whereas right now it's a little bit in limbo on whether they could do that or not, but technically they can't. Does that make sense?
So we need to give them permission to be able to do what they need to do.
Right, yeah. And since we're already looking at adjusting the truck ordinance, we'll adjust that at the same time, just so the ordinances all work together.
So with Lakewood Road already being all gnarly, I drive up and down that road, it's just, they don't repave it, they just patch it. And so now you want to open it up to big, heavy trucks, that's going to bombard the road even more.
Yeah, so on this, I've talked to the road commission a few different times about it. And because I'm not sure, I'm not a road engineer, so like Riley Thompson seems fine to me, but apparently it is built on silt with a high water table. And White Lake Drive, obviously everyone probably knows about the water issues over there, so it is in somewhat danger. On Lakewood Road, that one is apparently supposed to have plans moving forward from the road commission and would alleviate truck issues of going strictly through the village. Because right now, so the A1 truck route road goes through Kenwood, it goes right through a residential area with a bunch of stops. Because that was part of the grant process, part of the village takes care of their own roads, but because it was part of that, it had to be designated as an A1 truck route. So it seems reasonable to try to give trucks a way not to go directly through the village all the time. Now, when there's like frost restrictions and stuff like that, they have to follow that route at certain points of the year, because that's the A1 truck route. Right. See what else I said in the brief. I think that was basically both of them. Two separate issues, essentially. I'm waiting to hear back from an engineer from the road commission again, specifically if he would like to eliminate certain roads or add certain roads, things like this, based on his recommendation. Because I think there's really two primary concerns. Safety, like when you get to the end of Riley Thompson, if you're trying to turn semi-trucks left going on to 120, I think of that as an obvious safety concern, and then there's wear and tear on the roads, and those are two separate issues. But the road commission did say, and they included in their example ordinance that I read which I believe I included, yeah. They have it set up on what I normally refer to as a blacklist, a list of things that you can't use, rather than the whitelist version of the specific ones that you can use. And that, having that limited list also allows you to post signs. Now, Dalton, we have some signs posted, like at the end of Riley Thompson, that no trucks over 5 axles on this road. But if it's all of your roads except for a few of the roads, very difficult to post all of those.
Which is why I think we talked about the blacklists.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be easier only talking about 4 or 5 rows that we blacklisted from trucks.
Right.
Areas, so. I think we're on the right track with that also.
Yeah.
So you're just waiting for more information, the road commission, pretty much?
Just finalizing something, and there's gonna be those 2 adjustments, so specifically on the roads,
Yeah.
switching that over, and then also on the issue with incorporating the abilities of the planning commission for special uses. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns? Next, we have the working session schedule. And so, up to this point, we've been kind of just figuring them out as we go. And of course, we had the 1 month where we had 5 meetings technically, and we'll try to not do anything, that many meetings in a single month for the next 3 or 7 months. But it would be nice to have a set schedule so we can all plan around it. I think doing the first week makes a decent amount of sense. That is not necessarily to have a working session the week before and then to have something we discuss come up the next week, because I have to then prepare packets within a couple of days and including everything else. And then if I'm trying to like adjust or write a resolution or an ordinance, that's probably not enough time to actually make that happen. So it'll probably be a month delay, but I think that's perfectly fine unless there's some small adjustment. The only other major issue I see with the first Monday of the month are elections. And elections, which is why we're not having this one at the first week in May, because that was originally what I was thinking. But we have an election next week, and so this room's going to be taken up, and Lori is super busy with the election, and it's not, that wouldn't work. But you can really only have elections in May, August, and November unless you have a very unusual election.
An unusual year, yeah.
So I think it would probably make sense to have working sessions scheduled the first Monday, but maybe excluding May, August, and November, something like that.
Well, we also look at July 5th, that's the day after.
Oh, that's true.
That's a
Yes.
big one right there.
We'll look at those dates.
Yes, that would make sense.
You will still be sleeping probably, leftovers from the day before.
Right.
And like tonight, the Village of Lakewood Club is having a meeting, and I really wanted to be part of that too, but I can't split. But they're talking about hiring a city manager for 2 square miles? Like, no. I sent them an email, but I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it's difficult with so many meetings. I've had a lot of overlapping meetings in the last few months.
Well, and for us, I mean, just to be, you know, we had planned when we took this position, we had 1 in a month. We're involved in 4 levels of local government. And we're having a really hard time trying to juggle all those things. I just got a full-time job. So really, I know it might seem like it's only 2 meetings a month. That's a lot. We literally doubled our workload. I know it's on you, you're here full-time. For us, it's on top of what we already have going on in other places. And it's really, I know it doesn't sound like much to you, I'm sure. It was only 2 instead of 5. But for us, it's still doubling our workload too with trying to juggle the other things that we have. I'm supposed to be at something for the GOP tonight, but we couldn't go because of this meeting. So we're kind of, and then summer's coming, and summer is a very short time in Michigan, and we live on the lake. So we're looking at this summer, and we're kind of like, I was trying to go through and plug in the weeks, which is of the months for the meetings, and that's why we realized that July 5th, you know, was the day after Monday. And so, we're talking about taking some months off because of elections, but for us, I mean, it's just, it's a lot.
Yeah, I get it. So essentially the other ways we can do, if we cut out working sessions, then we could essentially have this list of items plus the list of items that we'll have at the next meeting. So we could have these huge meetings. Or we can cut the working sessions and essentially cut this information. so there wouldn't be so much full board discussion. It's not, I mean, there are three legitimate options.
Right.
It's
I
just.
do like the working session.
I do.
Because there's a lot
So
of
it's not
information.
much pressure. So I see the pros and the cons. I'm just trying to put
Right.
the cons out there.
Right.
Just so that we're upfront about it, that it is doubling our workload too.
Right.
I mean, I know you're trying to get a lot done, and there's a lot of stuff that wasn't taken care of, and you're really playing catch-up for the last several years. And I get that, and I respect that, because I can see, I mean, your work, you're doing the work, and I appreciate
Big
that.
time.
So I don't want to come across as being negative, but at the same time, we're trying to juggle a life outside of here.
Right, oh yeah, I completely get it. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with the planning commission right now in their schedules, is I've been encouraging working sessions, and they've held several of them, but it's a lot to go from one meeting to two meetings, and then Lee and Noel are on other boards, and Lorraine, I mean, Chief Stiles, how many meetings does he possibly go to? I wouldn't want to count those.
May I make a suggestion? Can you do your working sessions, but we used to do them, even before you. We
Yeah,
did,
before me, yeah.
they did them before the meeting, the meeting night. Your Monday night meeting, it was at 5 o'clock, it was I got an hour working session,
Yeah.
there were some things that go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took a little bit of time out of their, hey, I work at 4:30, well, try faster. Because we had the same problem, was I had given up my time, I'm teaching, I'm coaching my kids' baseball team, and conflicts, we all have them.
Right.
But they chose to do that for about 3 years, and then they kind of quashed those, but, I mean, that was just something they'd done when I first started.
I like that.
I do too.
Honestly.
I know,
I
it
do,
kind of
it
makes,
takes one night as opposed to.
it does, and it cuts into your, don't get dinner, well, like I say, eating your chance.
Intermittent fasting.
Internet is not gonna get
There you go, that's your
It's just an option, I know they did it in the past, and I just didn't know if that was something that was
I like
an
that.
idea. I mean, trying to save you guys, again, the words there, I have to come from others.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
And it's fresh in your mind.
Right.
You know, that's the only thing I can think of that would be a negative about it, is that if we're doing a working session from 5 to 6, and we're like, okay, well, let's gather some more information. Now it's all put off for another month, which it's been put off, whatever it is we're dealing with, so it's not like it's a major thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually a huge issue.
Okay.
And so, because if we're discussing something in the working session, and we need more information, we have to put it up for a month, I don't think that's too much of a difference if we had them on the first Mondays. I think, because I'm not gonna be able to make major adjustments or write major things before the next week anyways,
Okay.
you're gonna be looking at putting that out 5 weeks on average. So putting it out 4 weeks, I don't think it's too big of a deal. We don't want government to move too fast. A lot of people actually do. A lot of people I talk to want government to move really fast. I don't want government to move very fast. Obviously, it's my job to make things happen, so I've been moving at a decent pace over the last few months, but I think it's reasonable. Does anyone oppose? Anyone think that's a bad idea?
Not opposed.
All right, well, I think it's reasonable, yeah, we'll move in that direction then. All right, next is channel maintenance. So obviously, putting in the channels was a big deal last year. I assumed coming in that there was some sort of plan that was already worked out, that I would just be in charge of making sure it gets implemented. There was no plan. There was no plan at all. No one said it'd be fun. I didn't come in with an expectation. But, so what the plan is now, and I know I wrote a big long thing here, and I read it last week, so I can't remember exactly what's in here. But we have the permits for soil erosion from the state, from Eagle, to do work on those channels out through 2025. Now, our year permit from the county, from the Department of Public Works, was expiring. I talked to Rob Ribbons, he's great, he extended it for a year. But you run into issues using equipment, which is a problem, because the one channel between Middle Lake and West Lake is already filled in with sand on the Middle Lake end. So that lasted a total of a few months. And so we don't know how much effort that's going to take to keep maintaining, but right now they want us to work with hand tools. If that doesn't work, then every few years you're looking at bringing in equipment with bigger permits. problems going across people's land area. Now, I've talked to every landowner that we have to go across their land to get to the different parts of the channels, and they're all completely fine with it, no problem. There was only one abutting landowner that I wasn't able to talk to because they weren't there. I missed them on the weekend that I was doing rounds for it. And they've all also said that we can, if it's just sand, we can move sand onto their beach area, which is great. Now, there's also muck and leaves and that type of stuff we'll probably have to bucket out. We've already looked at the budget for maintenance, and I was looking at upping it because they were already behind and understaffed. So we're looking at getting more maintenance personnel to help out with this. This is a major potential project here to keep going. Now, the channel between Twin Lake and Middle Lake is big. And so that one is in pretty good shape. I don't see the water stopping flowing through there for a decent amount of time, especially if we maintain it in some small way. It was used for speedboats and sea-doos quite a bit. I talked to the neighbors and some of the different people on the lakes, and you can see that the wave action inside, because I visited with the engineer and with the contractors, is collapsing part of the side for erosion. So for that, at one time, the engineer said it was talked about getting a gate, because Professional Lake Management, PLM, wants access in between there for their boat to manage weed treatments and stuff like that. Ideally, I would not like to do that. I don't think that's the best route to pursue. I think signs to just say no wake zone, that keep people slow through there, allows people access, but also hopefully doesn't cause as much erosion. So I think that's a decent solution there. And then throwing a guy with a shovel.
We live right there what you're talking about. We've
Yeah.
actually seen people fly through there in the rivers.
Yeah, I mean, I
Especially
probably
the
would.
renters. The renters don't,
They don't care.
they don't care. They don't live there. It's not their
And
area.
it looks like it'd be fun. It's probably something I would do, except for if you put up signs that said no wake zone, I would probably not do it. So I think it's reasonable to put those up. I think that would hopefully solve that.
It does deter a little bit, like I said, between where we are at, the island right there, I've seen kids fly right through there, right between the island and the mainland. And you're talking, that water's maybe 3 feet deep. They don't care,
Yeah.
unfortunately. They still do it.
Right.
We were out there, actually not too far from their house one year. We're on the side of the pontoon, and the guy in the wave runner told us, I had to, went between us and the shore. We're 30 feet from the shore.
Yeah.
And he was a high rate of speed, you're like, what the heck are you doing?
Right.
You know, there's kids out here swimming.
Right.
But renters, they don't live out there, they don't respect the area. We don't have, in my opinion, the proper amount of people reporting, or just, we don't have the manpower to man that lake, period. The DNR is funny, every 4th of July, it's a madhouse. I won't even go out like the 4th of July. I stay outside and watch for the dock.
That's like the Three Stooges.
It's bad. And the day after, you'll see the sheriff out there with the DNR. It's always the day after, not the day of.
Right.
Every year. And it's funny. It's comical. I think last year was the first year I actually seen DNR out there. That was the day before the 4th of July.
Yeah. They don't
Monday.
usually go.
But it was still good to see because they were actually out there pulling people over. It was like, finally.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. We don't go out on 4th of July either.
I don't think people, residents do.
A life insurance payment. I wanted to bring up something that was related to something earlier about that. I think the sign is an excellent idea, at the very least, maybe one on each lake,
Right.
facing out. The other thing was, that someone brought up earlier, was a cam.
Trail cams.
I know typically boats don't have a lot of markings on them to be able to identify who they belong to. But in a small town, you paste one picture on Facebook and you have about how many people, they're like, oh, I know, Tim, he lives over on, I'm not saying we want to do that, I'm just saying that's it's an idea of a deterrent. If they know that even if there's just a sign that says cameras monitored. Just a suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah, reasonable. Yeah, I mean, getting the lake levels to work has obviously been a big issue, and I think we have lake level outlet device on here in a little bit. But between that device and having these channels working, then we can maintain the levels that were set when that project was initially done in 1984, because it was surveyed out at certain levels. And so this system should be properly working this year for the first time in a very long time. I'm not sure how long.
Should.
Yeah, if everything goes well, as it's supposed to, depending on how well we dig out this channel.
In the 5 years we've lived here, I will say that right now, typically this time of year, we have really high water levels. And right now, we have a beach, which we have not seen in 5 years. So we are personally very happy. I don't know about everybody else, but we like what we see right now.
It's a mix.
Yeah,
Some people don't like that it's down,
My
some
neighbors
people-
have actually said they like it because they like having the beach out there.
Right.
Where last year, I know people had their fire pits washed out because the water level was so high.
Right.
Because it's so close.
Well, we did not have a tough winter either. The
No,
river-
this
the
river
river
was-
is 3.5 feet down, so.
Right. It's been very mild.
Water's down everywhere.
Yeah,
Right.
which is amazing, because last year,
Yeah.
before, it's been.
Well, I can remember pulling in here and the water's almost cresting over the driveway, through our channel.
Lake access.
Yeah, right.
Super dry spring.
That's the basic plan with the channel maintenance, is to do it essentially in the way that will be clunky and hard and hopefully it works.
I hope they don't put up a gate that really break them.
Yeah, that's not the plan for now. That would obviously be a decent project, so it'd have to go through the board if we did. But for the signs, I'm just going to do it.
Okay.
Anything else on channel maintenance? Now we move on to the channels. With the channel bridge, a bunch of things on the schedule are owing to the lakes. The channel bridge is the road bridge that is over the channel between West and Middle Lake. It's in rough shape. The cement up top is broken. The cement underneath, where the actual water is, you can see how it's fallen out probably half the depth of the cement in the bridge. It's in obviously bad shape. The road commission was going to replace it last year, and they bought a culvert to do that project. But it turns out that people really like the bridge and being able to go under it in kayaks and canoes and playing under it and this type of thing, especially now that the channels are operational instead of a swamp there. There's still a swamp next to the channel. We'll have to manage that on the maintenance end. But they didn't have numbers at the time, and now the road commission has put it off for a year, and they want to do it this year. I got them to get me numbers on what those differences would be, so it's $139,200 to do the road in the way that the road commission would do it, which would properly handle traffic and properly handle the water. To do it in the way that would be cool, to have a bridge that you can play under and do those types of things, is $209,000. So approximately that's $69,000 someone has to come up with, and they want it by the end of May. So it puts us, I asked about maybe putting it off another year, but they've already put it off a year. They wouldn't really prefer to. I could inquire into it again. It gives us such a short amount of time. When these channels were put in, I talked to the engineer about this, and he said normally you would establish a special assessment district for taxes for the people on the lakes to pay for channels. Otherwise, everyone in the township is paying specifically for lake channels. He said the only townships that usually don't do that are townships that are flush on cash. You encounter them down around Howland and stuff like that. That was not set up in this case. I thought maybe it would make sense to put this difference into something like that, but a special assessment is quite a process. As we know, it requires 4 resolutions. It's quite a thing, so we definitely can't do it by the end of May. We can't do it quickly, and I think it may be a controversial thing. And even if we don't do it in this case, we probably should look at it for channel maintenance going forward. Otherwise, everyone's kind of flipping that bill. Otherwise, I know there's been talked about establishing a lake association. There's been some inquiry into, one of the people on the channels has looked into getting grants and everything last year, but because it wasn't followed up with, now we got this tight time frame. You can't apply for a grant so that you get next month on this type of thing. So it's in a rough spot as far as that bridge goes.
I remember we had an issue just with putting the channels in between the lakes.
Mhm.
There was an uproar with the costs.
Mhm.
The extra $69,000, it might be an issue.
Right.
I can see that becoming an issue. And I think we should hear more about that before we start spending other people's tax money for something that they might not pay for.
Yeah, I think it's really a thing you at least have to budget for, and ideally, I think that's a difference that shouldn't come out of the general fund, out of everyone's pocket. But if we're trying to come up with it on a short time frame, I don't see how, unless there are some big donors that want to come up with $69,000 to have the bridge there, I don't see how to make up the difference. It's not an obvious solvable situation as far as I can tell.
Not without taxpayer approval, there's some that we would, I would think that we would want to hear from.
Yeah.
Just arbitrarily spend other people's money, just because it's cool. I don't agree with that.
For a limited use. You know, I mean, there are people in the township that their entire lives have never been driven across that bridge.
Exactly.
Exactly.
They're definitely never gonna take a kayak underneath it
Yeah.
either.
Right,
So we say we're
exactly.
under it.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly, and that was the big thing.
I'm one of those people, right? I'm never gonna go
Yeah,
over that
and
bridge.
that was the
Except for
big
me.
thing was, people say, well, we can't do kayaks or canoes or, and it's like,
We'll take it somewhere we can.
I say that out loud.
I didn't say that, but yeah.
I'm the same way. I don't go driving around the lakes. I don't play in the lakes. I shouldn't be taxed for crap that I'm never gonna use. If they want a dam bridge, they pay for it from dam sale. Otherwise, they get a culvert.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, so, because I just had a short interaction with the road commission about the time frame, and I was really hoping they'd give us a year to kind of figure it out, but they've already put it off a year, and it wasn't.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, and so that is a bit of an issue, and I don't know at what point we're getting into a safety issue, because it looks, the bridge looks rough. So, if someone wanted to do, if the residents wanted to do a special assessment district, they can trigger it by getting a certain number of signatures. They would need a decent number to try to add up to that to get it going. It obviously couldn't happen by the end of May. But if they start that process and make a bunch of progress on it in the short amount of time, maybe that would make the road commission open to delaying it another year. But if the road commission thinks it's a safety issue as far as the bridge is structurally, I don't think they're going to delay it, which is reasonable. So, but I don't think there's anything for us to really do to solve the issue.
Safety or fun? It sounds like to me. We're gonna have to go with safety. We don't have the fun option of $69,000 in the coffers to come up with.
Right.
That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I can see where that could be a fun, it's a great, I understand. We've always done it, we love it, that's one of our things we always do, generation after generation, well, that's great. Then where have you been for the last year coming up with these signatures to, maybe they didn't know.
Right.
But obviously they can tell when they go under that bridge or over that bridge that it obviously is falling apart. So, I mean, I hate to put it off for even another year if it's that bad.
Right.
Just on the possibility that there might be some people that might want to pay another $69,000.
Right, and I know there was a decent amount of interest. They had little protests, they had signs and stuff
That's why I
out
put it
there.
off,
Right.
because they had some pushback from some of the residents about
Right,
putting in the culvert and not redoing the bridge, so that's why they put it off a year.
right. And essentially,
Then it just fell away.
Wait, where are they?
right,
I don't know.
because
Is
if,
it a fundraiser?
I've
if the
never heard
process
another
would have been
thing.
triggered at that
There were some-
time.
I had heard from the road commission that there were some people that didn't want to lose a bridge, okay? So they put it off, and here we are.
Well, at that point, a year ago, I mean, they could have started donations.
Exactly, they could have.
If they've done petitions, if they've done.
Well, and I know there was information sent to the previous supervisor about grants and that type of thing, because I talked to one of the neighbors and they sent me that information as well. It wasn't followed up with, and I know some of those processes can be hard to go through, but as far as I know, it wasn't followed up with, at least nothing came through on it. So, if that avenue was pursued, we might be in a better position now, but we are in the position that we're in.
And
You
also
heard more
too,
than
we
I
had a
heard.
rough year.
You heard more than I heard, because I didn't even hear anything about the possibility of grants.
Oh yeah, there was a neighbor that looked into 3 different avenues, 3 different organizations for grants, and it looked like good information, but it wasn't followed up with.
I don't think anybody could be happy with another assessment. We're still thinking about the one the drain commission already put on as it is.
Right, assessments are not usually popular as taxes in
Well, I'm
general.
saying, you ain't gonna find anybody who's gonna donate some money to,
Well, that's.
when they're already not happy with the drain commission.
I don't think it'd be hard to find some people to donate money. I
Well,
think
you can
finding
find
people to
people that
donate
will donate.
$69,000, that would probably be higher. If it was $6,900,
Right,
that might not be too bad.
more feasible.
But yeah, $69,000 is not a small chunk.
But the problem is, you got literally just a very select few that even actually utilize the bridge for kayaks and jet skis and whatnot.
Right.
It's a niche group.
Yeah.
But you have to consider how many people are in each one of the lakes that might be willing to do a one-time fee, or you have to figure out how many people there is. You have all the, you already have the rules for the, for having the lakes treated, so you know how many property owners are on there. And you kinda gotta figure that out, divide that up by the 69,000 and see what it would come to. I think there is a lot of people that would fundraise and do donations. I know there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Some people look at it as, it makes our lakes much more attractive that we can go between all three lakes again, which hasn't been able to be done in years. And, it also, it makes a difference on your property values.
Yes.
Taxes go up as the property values go up, and, when people sell their houses, whatever. I mean, there's more than one way to look at that, to me.
Very good points.
So, I don't think that, to me, 69,000 doesn't seem that outrageous when you look at, but that's something that definitely the people on the lakes need to look at and
Yeah,
decide
it's
on.
outrageous when you gotta come up with the money by the end of May.
Well,
That's the
yeah,
problem.
Right,
That's
that's
the
right.
crunch when we're under a month.
Right,
Yeah, I was a little surprised on the time frame, and
right.
It's
Well,
fine.
the road commission probably should have come up with a little better, instead of just suddenly saying, oh, now we're gonna do it. And
Exactly.
well, they sat on it for a year at this point.
Yeah, they haven't
It's been
been
over.
approved anybody out here.
They still needed to,
Oh, they didn't go in there, except when it's a plan took place.
so,
Oh,
Right,
they raised
yeah.
money.
yeah,
Well, the township could have looked at initiating like a special assessment or something like that.
yeah.
Ideally, it comes from the citizens signing a petition,
Right.
50%, something like that. But in this case, we're
Yeah.
Can you reach out to the people in the past that have done the sign, that have been, that last year that were looking for grants and say, hey, look, you've got 1 month. I could go on your behalf to the commission and say, look, it's been a rough year. So can you give us an extension of 6 months? If you're willing to take this on and put some time into it, I'm talking to whoever it is that really wants the whole
That's good,
thing.
Renee.
Then put the ball in their court, because otherwise it's gonna reflect right back here.
I've already done both those things.
Have you done, okay, so what's your synopsis, what's come out of that? Have you had
Well,
any thoughts?
for pursuing the grants, it needs to be something that the township would be involved in, because it's
Township level?
a government project, right, so it can't just purely be a private citizen. So them getting the township information was a pretty good step
Right.
as far as that goes. And then, yeah, as I went out and talked to the various neighbors, they talked about it quite a bit, because they're adjacent landowners.
Well, if we did, let's say, a petition, how many signatures would we require from the people around the lakes?
I'm not sure
Taken care of?
offhand. Normally, it's something like 50% of the people that would be affected. Is that correct? 51%.
51% have to sign the petition.
Right. So it'd be a decent number if you're doing the people around the lakes. And I mean, on that one, because the bridge connects West Lake and Middle Lake, it could just be those two lakes. Seemed to make sense. I mean, technically, Twin Lake, Middle Lake, and West Lake are connected. That's part of the 1984 project. North Lake wasn't connected at the time because its water quality wasn't as high. So that's why that one's not connected.
But that would now be part of the assessment now, so all 4 lakes would be.
It'd be a different assessment if a special assessment was done for it.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, I would need to get those signatures involved with it as well, because it's all.
There
part of the
isn't a
lakes.
channel between North and.
So North Lake wouldn't have nothing to do with it, just the.
North Lake would definitely have nothing to do with
Nothing to
this.
do.
No,
North
there's no
Lake-
access.
That's what I
There's
wanted to
no
make
access
sure.
on North Lake, it's West, Middle, and Twin, those
That are
three are
connected.
connected by channels.
Right.
Right, that's what I wanted to make sure.
All right,
Do you
any,
have somebody that's willing to take up that?
as far as like the grants are concerned, something like that? Around collecting signatures for the special assessment, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that was an option that was thrown out there at the time, or anyone was informed about it. But as far as I know, nothing has come our direction. Anything else on Channel Bridge? Lake level outlet device. So this one is essentially an underground dam on the south side of Twin Lake. It was put in 1984 as part of the rod drain project, and when channels were put in connecting 3 lakes. At that time, the lake level was legally established for adjusting that lake level outlet device, so that there would be a winter level and a summer level. That fluctuates by 6 inches. So the winter level is 678 feet above sea level, and then the summer level from May 15th to October 15th is 6 inches above that. Now, at some point, that device became semi-functional, in that it would maintain the winter level all year, but it wasn't set up to maintain the summer level. Now, the Drain Commissioner, now called the Water Resources Commissioner, their office is looking at, I met with them out there along with some surveyors and engineers. They're looking at replacing that device right about now, sometime in the next few weeks, hopefully before May 15th, and that will all be properly working, because the wood is rotted in there, some of the wood is cut, the metal is rusted, so it doesn't look like a great device. Also, when they have the water blocked, they're going to video under the part that goes under the road and make sure that's all clear and good and working correctly also. So if we have that part working, the lake level outlet device and the channels working properly, and the rod drain has been heavily updated for processing phosphorus and this type of stuff, then everything is working properly, the lake levels should maintain where they are, and we have an objective standard then. As long as we're maintaining the channels and the lake level outlet device as should be proper, then everyone that complains about the lakes being too high or too low, they are what they're supposed to legally be at, and according to the document in 1984. That's what I would like. I like objective things. All right, anything else there? Mandatory water connections. So, Dalton Township, Muskegon Charter Township, Laketon Township, and Fruitland Township are all part of the Water Policy Board at a higher level. So that board helps because we have to work with the county on connecting through water. We also work with them on sewer, but the water is separate. And essentially, we need the ordinances to agree. So we need the Water Policy Board to make policies, and then all 4 townships to pass the same ordinances to be in alignment. Otherwise, the only other obvious way to resolve it is a lawsuit between the municipalities. And I have one file, one drawer in my office that is previous lawsuits over this specific board. I have inquired into, they've already been looking into doing a conflict resolution policy that would change that a little bit, and I've asked about that several times, and I would like to push that issue a little bit more. It is a definite issue. On a more fine point, this specifically is brought up because we have a policy about when you have to connect the water, mandatorily. When it first goes in, if you're already in an existing house, you don't have to unless you sell it, or if you're building new. And if you're building new, if you're 200 feet off of the property line, then you don't have to connect. A lot of people are building just beyond that point, which means that the bond for the water system is difficult to come up with payments necessarily over time. So this specifically was brought up over a house that's building 700 feet off the property line in Muskegon Charter Township. And because this has been an ongoing issue, we've looked at other municipalities that have had the same type of thing, and some of them have the people pay the connection fee, but then if you're building so far back, in this case 200 feet, maybe it could be 500 feet, it could be something different, then you can end up putting in your own well and not actually connecting at that time, but that means that in the future, a different person doesn't have to pay that fee when they build something closer to the road. In some way, the policy is looking at being changed, but essentially, the Water Policy Board will come up with this policy, and we have to look at if we want to approve it. And if we're the only municipality not approving it, we have an issue, and we'll try to work out a new conflict resolution policy in that board at that time. But what do you guys think about mandatory connection, so many offset as far as feed is concerned?
Personally, I do not like the fact that someone can come in and tell me that I have to do something on my property. I'm a well, I like a well. I don't want to have all the crap that comes in through Public water supplies, not a fan.
Nope.
So that's just me, that's my personal feeling. I have not talked to any residents around me, but for me, no. I want a well, don't tell me I have to do something and I have to pay for it, period.
I 100% agree. A friend that lived in Norton Shores recently moved to Florida. Her water bill in Norton Shores, for 2 people in the home, they were charging her 12 to 15,000 gallons. And then she goes to Florida and it's a third of that, miraculously. So somewhere, somehow, the water, I don't know how they measure or whatnot, but again, it's the chemicals, the fluoride, we don't need it, it's neurotoxic. Chlorine, no, don't make me go to city water. I will leave the township. Just that simple, I'm out here.
Well, so specifically on this, are you then saying you think the 200-foot offset makes sense? So that if someone has the space, they can essentially get out of connecting to the water?
We don't have much space on ours. I know ours is grandfathered in, I get that it was built in 1974, and we have a well.
Is there, is there?
Well, but, yeah, water's probably not coming your direction for at least a couple of decades.
Not running.
Oh, yeah, you ain't gonna have water up by you,
No.
we'll all be dead.
Yeah,
Right.
no.
We're talking about 136 fire hydrants that run down Whitehall Road and part of Central. Right. Which none of you understand that the fire department used to pay for those fire hydrants every year,
Wow.
to the tune of $60,000 a year.
Yep.
We paid for fire hydrants, that we didn't even want.
I
So,
mean, we're paying for
when we
that
say you don't
system.
want it to happen, you
There.
have to understand the backstory that it's there. It's there, there's nothing we're gonna do about it, we have to do it, but the money, if we don't pay it, if the citizens don't pay it,
Everybody pays it. The paper, if
if
the
you're coming back to
citizens
you
that
guys,
are on
we've already
those
been in,
water
what,
lines
7
don't pay it,
lawsuits?
I don't
the whole
know.
township.
It is an
7 or
entire
8
drawer.
It was 7 or 8 lawsuits that we went through, till we finally found that they couldn't charge us to pay, well, what did we end up paying? $400 and some odd $1,000 or something into the fund, and they only gave us back $63,000 when they found out it was illegal, that they couldn't charge us
That's
to.
infuriating.
Yeah, it is.
But the township boards are the ones that agreed to that, so you're, again, from past history, I wouldn't go lightly with this. I
No,
get
because, I
what
mean,
you're saying about
it
not
is.
wanting the chemicals and all
Right,
that, but
right.
we're already in a deficit, you're going to eat some more.
Yeah,
Or
the
you're
thing
gonna
is,
spend, you're gonna
these are
spend it in lawsuit
existing
fees.
lines. These are existing water lines.
Yes, they're already in place.
They're already there, the township is already paying for them. If
Yep.
people do not hook up to them, the bill's gotta be paid some way.
Right.
So if the people that are on the line that should be hooking up, aren't hooking up and paying the fees, the whole township pays.
I would be so angry.
Oh, it's a difficult situation,
Very
as they
bizarre.
are, we
Very
don't,
bizarre.
right. If we had a bunch of simple situations, then
Yeah,
we wouldn't
that's
really need to be here,
fine.
you know? But, on that, I think maybe it's reasonable, the one brought up, and I think it came from Fruitport, not exactly sure, and that's right here. But if you're so far off the line, and you have the space to do your own stuff, to do a well, to do a septic, you don't have to connect, but you have to, so you don't have to connect and pay the ongoing fees and the ongoing usage, but you have to pay the initial connecting fee. And then the next person that they connect, they obviously have to pay to run their own lines with the contractor, that type of thing. And they pay their usage fee if they would like to connect, or they can keep using the well and septic, or they can connect and pay usage fees, but not the connection fee at that time.
Well, I think the 200 feet is reasonable.
Yeah.
So, I hate to say it, it's reasonable.
Well, that's,
We're already running it.
right, that's what it's at now.
Yeah, it's already, I mean,
Right.
it's, yeah.
Yeah, so hasn't even been discussed of lowering that in some way. The discussion's only been on if everyone's building 250 feet off the line, no one connects the water, then are we paying the water bond?
Yeah, exactly.
The whole Flint deal and what happened to their water system.
Exactly.
It's like,
That's why I don't want to force
And
something.
they're even saying that the Heights is pretty much the same thing, but they're hiding it. That was Signage is in the same boat as what Flint was in.
It's a common municipality problem of the utility systems for water and sewer and stuff like
That's the
that.
problem with living cities.
Right.
You're basically being told what you have to do.
Right. Yeah, and ongoing maintenance of those things, you kind of run into a tragedy of the common, sometimes called. Any other comments on mandatory connection? All right. So, the enforcement process. This is, well, it's an interesting issue. And basically, I would say the ideal function of government is twofold. One is to protect citizens from each other, and for the government to protect you from other governments. Now, in this case, we're looking at the enforcement process of protecting citizens from each other and working that out. And it's just purely on the process itself. Now, I specifically, coming into office, I talked with the ordinance enforcer, and I essentially made the letters nicer. Right? So, which I think was a decent process. Try to promote a little more goodwill instead of this aggressive stance. It's an interesting give and take, because by the time I'm talking to people on the phone about a complaint, they usually want it taken care of within a few days. They want it very fast. And I've told people that you don't want me to have enough power to do that, and a lot of people disagree. They want me to have enough power to resolve things within a few days. But it'd be nice to have a process in place for these types of things, and our process right now isn't too bad. I think one of the problems with it is I could deviate from it when I want to. And I think that can be somewhat of an issue, which is somewhat what got me involved here initially. It's the issue I took up with farming. They didn't follow their own process. If they had followed the process of letters in that case, and really followed the process and hadn't gone after it in the aggressive way they would have, I wouldn't have responded so aggressively either. And I think we're seeing that issue extended out over the township. That if we respond really aggressively to people and they fight back, that's a very natural reaction. Now on this is quite complex. It's a little more complex than the brief that I included in what we could possibly do, in that we could have essentially a recommendation for me. So I'm the legal agent of the township. Right? It's a state statute, that's how it works. We could have the board make a recommendation on these types of things, and then I go through with it. We could have it come to the zoning board of appeals, which is very interesting. There's a zoning course called Citizen Planner through Michigan State University, and it's a 3-month course. I just did it on Saturday and Sunday. It was a very intense Saturday and Sunday here. But they had a bunch of interesting information. I hadn't come across that before, but we could have it go before the zoning board of appeals. Now, if a citation is issued, people can already appeal it to the zoning board of appeals. And then from there, that decision then goes on to be appealed directly to circuit court. It skips over district court. So we could do it something in that way. There's also a difference between zoning and regulatory ordinances. Now, obviously, the zoning board of appeals doesn't have jurisdiction over the regulatory ordinances, just the zoning ordinances. So we could have two slightly different processes for the different types, those two different types of ordinances, where one goes to the zoning board of appeals and one doesn't. And we also could have a difference between that type of hearing being automatically triggered, of going to the board or the zoning board of appeals, or I could include in letters that you can request to have a hearing at that time. Or you could go straight with like a citation to court or something like that. So there's a decent amount of options here. Currently what I'm thinking is something like we do discovery. So we get a complaint. We send out, the zoning enforcer goes out, it's on his list to look at. He finds it's a violation. He sends it out saying you're in violation, please clean it up. And then he has a date or a week, 2, 3 later, where he's going back to look at it again, depending on the issue. He finds it's in violation, he sends them another letter. And then I'm doing another letter. It's quite a long, kind of soft process at this point, because they softened it a little bit. But the next time, so if you get those two things that are violations, we say that it would go to hearing. Then the next letter is a notice to come to a hearing, either before the board or the zoning board of appeals, to look at the issue. then that board makes either the decision or the recommendation to proceed with issuing something like a citation or bringing it to court, an injunction, the different options that are available. And then after that, the legal action is taken by administration, essentially, by me at that point, carrying it forward. I think something in that way would make sense. I think we should probably play with this a little bit, debate it, and work it out, because it's not something that we want to put in place, and we'll have to change, if we're doing the zoning board of appeals for doing hearings, we have to change it as an ordinance.
Right.
So in ordinance changes, even if everyone decently agrees, probably take almost 6 months to get through. So it's not going to be a fast process that we're just going to change immediately here, but I like the idea of establishing a nice solid process that everyone knows and understands, and it goes before one of the boards. There's a balancing issue, because if you're in Muskegon Charter Township, 4 times their size, you're probably not going to have every citation go before a board, because it's not going to be logistically feasible. If you're in Blue Lake or Holton and you're tiny, it's no big deal. You can have every issue go before the board, not unless you're very aggressive on it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that many based on the population. We're in the middle on everything. I mean, that's our logistical issues with fire, that's our logistical issues with roads, with sewer, with water. We're right in the middle between being a decently large township and a small township. We're a very solid middle-sized township. And I think the enforcement process is kind of the same thing. Now, previously, and I haven't done the statistics on it, but from the zoning administrator and the enforcement officer, we have been getting maybe 8, 9 things that actually go to court, something like that. And a lot of people that are going to go to court, it ends up getting resolved, so they don't end up getting a fine, something in that direction. And we do civil citations, we don't do criminal, so which I think is solid. I want to continue that policy, and I think that's a good avenue to pursue. And just essentially adding in the step of a hearing, one step sooner than I'm taking action now, I think is reasonable.
I like the checks and balances,
Yeah.
I like that.
for sure, at any level,
Right.
even in a township.
Yeah.
We're in other words, it's not just one person that's got a power trip, going off and doing whatever he or she wants, and throwing their weight around. It doesn't exactly.
Right. Essentially, I want to take a little power away from myself.
Which is what we all want.
Which we appreciate.
I mean, small government, I mean,
Right.
you want to make sure not one individual is dictating what's
Right.
going on. We
Right.
want to have what we have right here, moderation and then talking things out and putting things to a vote, and the majority should have a say. Especially when we're looking at what we have here, where individuals might have an issue and we don't hear what's going on. We don't know why they have those issues, why it hasn't been taken care of. So then come before the board, they can cite their arguments, hey, this is what's been going on, why?
Right.
And it gives us an idea of whether to pursue or not to pursue.
Right.
And keep it within reason.
Yeah, people can get sick, all kinds of things can happen in people's lives to
Right.
cause them to not be able to move ahead on a citation.
Yeah.
I agree with this. I think this, actually looking this over, it sounds
Yeah.
very reasonable.
I put a happy face on mine.
Yeah, well, and the ordinance I put in here as an example is from Fremont Township. Now, there are 4 Fremont Townships in the state of Michigan, and none of them are the Fremont we are all thinking of. It's the city of Fremont, and they also do their zoning ordinances in conjunction with Dalton Township and Sheridan Charter Township. And I have talked to them about various things, actually things that will come up later in this meeting. But I just stumbled across this. They're from Osceola, I think. And it's one thing I wanted to bring up, so I just figured I'd include it. It's ironic that it's from Fremont, a Fremont.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about enforcement process? Next, we have the monitoring of illegal dumping. So obviously dumping in this area is an issue, has been for a very long time, which is normal in rural areas.
Yep.
Especially now as Dalton develops, you have this little bit of a decent amount of a cultural clash from the different areas. And there's a lag time as an area develops as well. So people are still going out into the woods on any land that they can find on trails and just throwing stuff. You can cruise through and you can find tires and bed mattresses, all sorts of stuff. Cars, burnt out cars, all sorts, lots of stuff out there.
Yep.
And trying to fix that is very difficult. Unless we establish a millage and a police agency, then we're probably not gonna put someone out there to monitor it. We can do contracts like that, but it's very difficult to do. It can get quite expensive. Our maintenance supervisor actually brought up the idea, because we also have some people that are causing damage on parks specifically. They go and they tear up the driveways in some of the parks after we get them smoothed out and that type of thing. And just monitoring something like that, he thought the idea of putting up cameras, like you had mentioned on the channels earlier, would be a good idea. Now, I wasn't sure if that's a legitimate thing to do or pursue. I messaged the sheriff about it, he got back to me, and he had a politically correct statement, like he should make from his office, but he said if there is illegal activity, that should be reported, and if there is any video or camera evidence of that, they would also be happy to take that evidence into consideration. So essentially, he said yes, that it would make sense for us to pursue cameras like this. Now, that could be quite an operation, and I'm not trying to overload maintenance because they already are. But nevertheless, I think this is probably a good avenue to pursue for the idea of limiting this kind of general blight on vacant land.
Is there more places that people dump in? I mean, like, you know, I know the Village Lakewood Club definitely, because I'm on the village site, and they report people dumping all the time. You know, so how do you choose what areas to put the cameras in? Are they gonna be able to be in one location for a while, and if nothing is happening, move them over to another location?
That's exactly what I'm thinking, is because the areas do move, and they kind of become hot spots.
Yep.
So we just move the cameras to wherever we're getting reports of stuff being, and monitor that area for a while, and then move them around.
Yeah.
Be kind of a dynamic thing as we're working it out, but I think something like that would make sense.
Question, do you, I don't know if the sheriff answered this question or if you all know the answer, but if there are trail cams up, I know typically, I've seen, and I don't know if it's legal or not, but people that have private property will typically put a sign up that says, warning, there are cameras. Is that something that we have to do legally to be able to use that to whatever we?
I do not know, that's a good question.
Because if there's, I'm just asking because I don't know if that's a legality. Well, we have you on video, well, great, but you can have a posted sign. I'm just saying, I've seen stupider, I've seen dumber things happen. So I'm just wondering if that's something that needs to be done, if there has to be posted signs.
That's a reasonable concern. I did not ask about that. I didn't think about it.
If nothing else, a sign that says you may be on camera. They might go, ah, and just leave, even if there's not a camera there.
Right.
So a sign that's what, $7.99 might be a really good investment versus a camera that's $79. I'm just saying.
Well, both. I think we should have substance. I'm not big into bluffing. I don't think
Me neither, but if they're moving around, there is a possibility.
But it is. It's true. Yeah. And I'm not huge into monitoring either, but illegally dumping trash all over the place is also not okay.
Needs to be deterred.
Oh, but we've picked through garbage and found addresses and called
sure.
people, and let me tell you, it's fun.
But I've heard, now, correct me on this if I'm wrong, if you find garbage that has my name, address, and phone number on it, and you call me, you can't cite me for it because you don't know that it was that it was me that actually dumped it.
Right.
So that's why I'm.
But I can let you know that we know that you done, that you know that I know you don't. And we can, and we we've had people come and pick up their garbage and take it to the,
Wow.
Right.
oh yeah, they don't like it, but yeah.
Right,
But if they know that we're looking,
there's accountability.
there is.
And I mean, really what we're looking at is a cultural, societal change, different socioeconomic levels and everything in Dalton. And it takes a long time. It's not like it's gonna happen overnight. It usually takes generations to get a cultural change.
Right.
But I think it's reasonable at this point to have a little bit more of that moving in that direction. And I think there's a general will towards having a bit of a cleaner township, and I think that would definitely help with it. Yes.
Where does the money come? Where's the budget? Where does the money come? Let's say we decided that we do want to have signs and we do want to get a couple of trail cams. Maintenance, obviously, they're supportive of it.
Right.
Even though they're a little around. Where does that budget come from?
Well, those are small enough figures, because you're looking in the hundreds of dollars, that I make decisions like that every day, so that's not too big of a deal.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're looking at some sort of major operation, like we had cameras that were gonna be monitored and we had to contract out, something like that, you're looking into the thousands of dollars, then obviously we'd have to budget for that, it'd be a bigger deal. But a few $100, not too big of a deal.
Cool, I like it a lot.
Happy face, not mine again.
Yes.
All right, anything else? No. All right, next we have business licenses. So this is interesting because we have business licenses, but they're not exactly followed up with all the time. And I know of larger businesses that don't have business licenses, and I know that some that are permanent, and some people that have had pop-up small businesses have kind of been gone after for not having a business license, which seems weird. I know it's been talked about them being a financial burden in the past, they're $25, that doesn't seem huge, but yes.
Okay, Dalton Township has business license for auto sales,
Mhm.
auto mechanics, auto parts, dog kennels, and that's it.
Okay, right.
Yep.
Nothing else, and that's been an issue for a long time that I question. We should have some process for licensing every business that's in Dalton Township. So, for one thing, we need to know where all these businesses are. Are they in the right place? Are they conducting business properly? But nothing has ever been generated.
I'd
Okay,
also-
hotspot, I'm on that.
I'd also like to know personally to support my local businesses.
Absolutely.
I mean, even the license part aside, I mean, as a Dalton Township resident.
And, you know, they don't have to be like, the business license is $25 a year.
Right.
And for like the auto places, they just have to provide their license with the state of Michigan, which is what any business license, if they're licensed, they just have to bring it in. It's not a big deal, but truly, we have not enforced, because we really it's just those few businesses.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's been brought up to me too that we should just cut them. We just wouldn't have them. The thing with that is then if you get into different things, so if you don't know where those types of things are, then it can cause other problems in like special use permits for planning commission. If we start looking at different types of zoning, right? So there's different types of zoning. There's the traditional zoning, which is not used very much anymore, but it's essentially a pyramid. You have one area that you can do very little in. You have another level of zoning, you can do all of that plus a little more. You have another level of zoning, you can do all of those two things plus a little more. It's the first one created about a century ago, not in use very much. There's conventional zoning like we have, where you have your different areas and you essentially have your different sets of rules for those different areas. Then there's form-based zoning, which is becoming a thing. I believe Fremont is implemented it now, maybe Grand Rapids, but definitely Fremont, where it works very well in cities and it's moving into rural areas now, where your things have to look a certain way, but the actual use doesn't matter that much. So especially in the city, if your building looks the same, you could have a restaurant in there, a shoe shop where you sell or manufacture shoes, or an apartment, whatever. It just has to look in a certain way, and the use is much less of a factor. And then there's performance-based, like the amount of traffic you're getting to a certain area and this type of thing. So that is essentially different types of safety issues. And performance-based can kind of fit into the other ones, something like that. But in an informal way, I think having business licenses so you know where stuff is seems decently reasonable. Which actually brings up one specific issue. So we have a place on Whitehall Road that has a business license. It's an automotive facility. And there have been a bunch of violations going back a number of years and different issues. There's some legal dispute over the property. It's essentially changing use from an auto place to something more like a dump, and is looking like it has some possibility of ending up being a township property. A problem, maybe not a property, but a problem, in that the township will flip the bill for cleaning up the property, which is going to be a lot of money. I don't think it's going to be as low as $10,000. I think it's going to be more than that.
Because it's cars and tires.
You've got oils and stuff like
And
that.
clean up, yes,
The oil
exactly,
is huge.
mitigation from
Just
potential-
tires alone, I've had reports of from
Yes.
hundreds to thousands of tires, depending on that, adds up fast.
Is this on the west side there?
Yes,
The white building?
yes.
Seems like they're doing some stuff right now.
Well, it's at the corner of Whitehall Road and Double Lake Road.
Wait, yeah.
And, well, there's been some disputes on whether they're taking things away or if they're adding
And
more.
more, and, yeah.
And so, but something like this, so they have, because they're an automotive place, they have a business license. And so it's odd, it's a little bit odd, but essentially what I've done is we're just not going to renew the business license, which is up in May. It's on a tight time frame anyways.
Yeah.
But if a business license is to be revoked, it goes through the board. Okay? So I'm going to bring that to the board in our next meeting for more review, and we'll have a lot more information
And I
on
think
it.
the big thing on that one too with Brad's is it's an automotive repair license. It has
Right.
nothing to do with the salvage portion, which is a separate license, which they should have to have, based on what is happening there now.
All right.
And kind of the same note, I'm kind of with you, Jeff, that personally I like to revoke. They're also behind on taxes,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
like more than a year.
yeah.
In 2 years, they lose their property.
They're more than two.
They're more than-
I believe it's at 3 that you trigger the process
Yeah.
for losing property.
Mhm. And they're pushing it now.
Right.
Been on that borderline a time ago.
Yeah. Death and taxes.
Yeah.
You can count on those too, that's for sure. Tribute if you get long enough ago, but same thing. Anything else on business licenses?
I'm just saying, I would just like to see them expand beyond what we're currently licensing right now. I mean, it's not gonna be an easy, quick process, and
Right.
I've been talking with my deputy, and I've been talking to Muskegon Charter Township about it for quite a while, because they do license every business. And, you know, I think that ongoing, I think in the next year, at least, we should look at expanding it to cover all businesses.
We have to license our dog.
Exactly.
I mean, $25, I mean, we don't even have an income other than, you
Yeah.
know, we can do $25, even if we had a license. But again, I would personally, even like, for example, I know of a real estate agent that, you know, that lives on our street, and she runs a business, she's licensed, she's awesome, we love her to pieces. I would love to see her name, for no other reason, I'd like to see a list of the people
Of
that are in
businesses.
Dalton Township,
Sure.
like her, as an example.
And that'd be nice if we could generate a list like that
That
from
would-
our business licenses.
And that would make that be a positive for them, it's almost like advertisement, right off, in a way.
business too.
But I would love to know that, I'd like to know who cuts hair in our area.
No kidding.
So, I mean, as a positive, not just a negative with a $25 fee, oh my gosh, they're regulating us, because you know how we are about big government, we're not big government people. But at the same time, as patrons, I personally, as a
Yeah,
resident,
because we
would like
could,
to know.
yeah, we could generate a business license list out of our programs, just like nothing.
Bring it.
And so curiosity, what does the $25 fee ensue, what does it go to?
It goes to the general fund.
Just to the general fund to beef up
Yep,
township money?
yep.
Okay.
Anything else? Business licenses? All right, we have private roads, which are obviously a big issue in the last meeting, and surprised me the direction all of that went. And we've had a couple of conversations since then. I personally have. Someone came into the office and they said that they live on one of the roads, and they really like it, and they're hoping that these continue. And I talked with someone on the phone that was initially against having the private road assessments, but he was thinking that it sounded like he could just not have it on one little part of the road, and that the rest of the road would still be taken care of, which obviously we can't do. It's,
Oh, yeah.
All or nothing.
right, it's the road or it's not the road.
I won't plow here, so I won't know.
Right, yeah, so there's definitely, I think there's been some stuff shifting in the community. I've included the documents here where we have the public notice, and we have the resolution that we passed, and we have a state law. And in these, we have the section where it's, the township board may proceed to carry out the proposed improvements unless written objections, so written objections, because we don't have any written objections here. We have not received a single one, is that still
No,
correct,
we have
Laura?
not.
So, we have not received any written objections from the record owners of land constituting more than 20% of the total land area. So, because even if you're at that level, that means that you might it's possible that you also don't, but you might have 80% support for it. If you have 20% of people opposing, and right now we have no written objection, we just have the verbal ones from the last meeting. So if people are really against this, I would really like to see some written objections, and that would make it pretty easy for us to vote on and move forward on. Without the 20% of total land area in the proposed special assessment districts as written objections, then it's one of those, it's a difficult situation on feedback for the township, for us to make a truly informed decision, but to a certain extent, we have to assume that a decent percentage of the people want it. Just like the one guy that came in, said he thought something wouldn't change with it. He saw no reason for it to discontinue. He was surprised that it was being brought up, but he wanted to make sure that we heard that he liked it. And so if something's just going, I think it's normal to assume that it would continue to go, which is my idea. If it was happening over the last 5 years, we hadn't had complaints, wanted to make it happen, should have happened last year.
Okay, so what about the people that made remarks about the county road commission not really doing the work?
I know, but I've been here for 4.5 years. I've not heard a word from
You
anyone.
never heard a word from
That meeting was the first time I heard a complaint about any of those private roads.
Wow, and I've heard them, well, maybe it's because of my friends, all my
I
friends.
don't know, but I mean,
I've heard
we,
certain people, but those are individuals, it's
Yeah.
not a whole
yeah, but not like that, and never a complaint comes into this office. And so I was flabbergasted.
I've heard complaints on all
Yes,
27 miles
well,
of the dirt
I mean, they
road.
know they're paying us, and we're paying the road commission, I mean,
Special assessment.
It sounded like, from what I gathered, and I could be wrong on this, but it sounded like most of them just bypassed township and went straight to Muskegon County Road Commission and just felt like they were knocking on a door that wasn't ever being opened. So they just felt flustered. That's what I got out of it.
it might be. So,
Well,
but the thing is, we
realize.
don't, I mean, we can't address, I mean, basically, we are not, I hate to say it, we're not the special assessment police. We are actually collecting the special assessment to pay the road commission because we actually went to the road commission and generated this contract.
Well, and
And
on
we are
this,
not responsible for what the road commission does.
it's a few $1,000s a year, $5,000, $7,000 a year for those roads. That's a very small amount of money for a road. So I talked to the road commission about it, and they said this was the minimum pay level with minimum maintenance level.
Ah, there you go,
And so,
there you go. That explains it right there.
right, it almost
Yeah, but
seems like,
You still gotta do something.
what almost seems like a decent amount of the complaint is that they would like their taxes increased. Now, no one's gonna say that, but if they want it taken care of 10 times as much, then it'd be 10 times the taxes.
Exactly.
Which we had someone in that last meeting comment, he wasn't on one of those roads, but he was saying that he had put together a private road thing before, and people paid $700 a person.
Yep.
And someone at that meeting was mentioning how they were paying $85 for the year. Well, so that's not quite 10 times, but that's a decent increase, and it depends on land area and that type of stuff, so it can fluctuate. The road commission, when I talked to them, because of these political issues and stuff, they would like to be out of the private road business. They're trying to not do them. They can be contracted out by the citizens to other people. You can do what you want with your private road. But, so they're completely fine. If people would like to not continue this, they would be in support of that. It would create a lot less work for the township internally on generating 4 resolutions, and going through a bunch of legal staff, and we paid lawyers, and all of this type of thing. So if people are opposed to it, I have no problem. If they want to come up with the 20% to oppose this, but then the road at that point would have no one taking care of it, other than if the people work it out. There's no plowing, there's no grading, there's no brining.
Right.
You get what you pay for.
Exactly. And if you pay for nothing, you get nothing.
Exactly.
And I think, and I totally.
And the contract, when the township initially worked out the contract with the road commission, it was based on minimal work, which was, they would grade it, they would grind it as part of our grinding program, they would plow it. We would do no ditching, that would all be extra, and they would do it, but we would have to pay for that separately.
Increase
How many times a year
taxes.
do they grade?
Exactly.
How many times a year do they grade the road?
My understanding, because they're doing our public roads twice that I know of, maybe twice a year. And that's what you get, and that's what, I mean, like,
Yeah.
up here on Automobile Road where my sister lives, twice a year they come through.
2 times grading, 1 time brining.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay.
And if
Yep.
it's wet when they brine, it is what it is.
Yep,
Right,
exactly.
okay.
So,
And the snow removal, they, you know, this is just an outsider perspective from what they described last meeting. It makes sense to me now. It didn't last meeting, but it does now from what you said. If I don't want to do something, I make sure I do it wrong.
I don't know.
I'm just saying-
Like I said,
Well,
we,
not necessarily.
they left that-
You can't take a snowplow and place it flat on a gravel road, and expect that there's still gonna be gravel.
That's true.
So they have to
they have
raise
to,
the blades
they
a
have to,
little bit.
they have to raise
Yeah,
it.
and I get that, but leaving it in the center,
No, that's,
Doesn't make
right,
sense.
that's.
And I don't know,
Your
because I
road,
didn't
see
drive
it.
the roads, so I
Right.
didn't keep
Right.
track, but.
Right, see,
I
we
mean, I had
see
looked
it.
at all the other dirt roads and the side roads, and yes, they didn't get done right away. Granted, that was the truth. I mean, there was some, you know, they went 24 or 48 hours even on our public
roads.
roads, yeah.
That road doesn't get
So,
done
yeah,
right.
so,
It could be
I
a few
mean,
days.
I understand that,
I
but,
mean, I live on a dirt road,
Yeah.
it's not in good shape a lot of the time.
yeah.
And I've had, I mean, over the last few months, I've had many discussions about the roads. I haven't gotten a single call where someone was like, I'm happy with my road.
I was gonna say,
It's never happened.
not a popular.
No, but the thing, you know, the thing is, like, unless we get 20% written
Right.
saying no, we have to go through with
We have to
this.
go
Yep.
through, right?
It's our obligation.
Yep, I agree.
Can we put that out on Facebook?
That's by law.
The
It's
concerns
by
and
law,
concerns?
we have to do
Well,
that.
anyone, I mean, it's a public group, you can post on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
It's
can't
by
right now
law.
on Facebook jail.
But it's by
Oh.
law, unless we get 20%
Someone
written disapproval, they don't want it, we have to move forward.
Has to be written.
And it has to be written, it can't be somebody coming in and saying, I don't like it.
Call complaint.
They need to,
They
we
come in and
need
write
it,
it, they have to,
but it has to be written, we need a signature.
Okay, that's
So,
good to know. I did not know that, so that's
yeah,
good to know.
so,
Address and signature.
yep. So, yeah, and I get it, it is very frustrating, especially, you know, my sister lives on a dirt road, man, those things, they're not that hard. But,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Even paved roads.
Yeah.
Anything else on the private road? Extra road signage. So specifically on this, and I've had multiple different inquiries, probably a handful of inquiries about this, on different issues. It usually has to do with speeding, and that someone is having people speed down the road, and then they want to do a speed study to lower the speed. Now, I've read manuals on speed studies from the state at this point. It's quite a complex process. It involves the county and the state, different levels of government. They have to do an assessment. And what they are assessing for is the safety of the driving conditions. So almost always, if you have a road where people are consistently speeding, it means they're not consistently crashing. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be consistently speeding that much. So when you trigger the speed study, most likely the speed limit is going to go up to adjust for the ability that people can drive on this road safely at that speed. So we want to avoid those.
It's one of the reasons that M120 through the school zone is not a 25-mile-an-hour zone, it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone, because their fear was they went down to 25, people would be crashing more than they're already crashing. 493 car accidents, 18 fatalities in 5 years.
Wow, can you say that again?
408 accidents. This was a 5-year study we just finished, when we finished that last time, I think,
A few months ago.
a few months ago, before you guys took office. We had 408 crashes, 18 fatalities from the 31 interchange to Wilson Beach. No, to Dawson, sorry. We didn't take to Wilson Beach. But that's why they kept the speeds up, because they didn't want to have them slow down, because then people crash.
There's such a disparity on that road because I drive it all the time, and it's very normal for people to be going 40 and very normal for people to be going 65. And
Or 70.
Yeah, or 70.
80.
I have had people pass me definitely going that fast. And you essentially end up with a highway with this huge differential in speed which causes accidents on its own.
Yep.
And then it's going past a bunch of stores and houses where people are trying to make a 90-degree turn onto or off of a road. It's definitely an issue. It's not going to be resolved for decades, way after I
We'll all
know.
be dead.
Question?
Yeah.
I don't know if you're talking about the same place I am. Is there ever going to be a light?
No.
Okay.
But
No,
the
that's what
RSA
we're
said, the
talking about.
RSA said anything that is there now, you will not see any upgrades anytime soon. There's no money planned, there's no plan, there's nothing.
Is there a amount of people that have to die at that intersection?
Doesn't matter. I sat and had 18 hours with the meetings with people, and that will great. But they will not do, and the only thing that they will potentially do is maybe put up some extra reflective signage and maybe restripe some things a little more aggressive. There will be no electronic of anything. And that stretch of road from US 31 to Dawson will not have anything done.
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially at 120, we're
It's a racetrack.
we're in a bad spot, and we don't have any power to do anything with it. So that's essentially how that works out.
What about the
It's more of an
ones-
acceptance
My
thing.
house.
What about the one by the railroad track, overboard, and on 120, that area?
That's
what we're talking about?
That will stay that way.
Yeah, Ryerson, Blue Lake, and
It
120.
took, what, 2.5 years to get the arrows painted on the road the right way.
I-
It's still a little wrong.
Yeah, I've turned there many thousands of times over my lifetime, and it keeps getting busier out there noticeably. From a couple of decades ago when I was a kid, living in Blue Lake Road has gotten a bunch of houses, it keeps getting busier, and apparently, maybe, things will change in 120 a couple of decades from now. Basically that way. But on extra road signage, which is a little different, you're mostly looking at roads that are not exactly your main road. So a lot of times they don't need to have signs on them. And so they don't have signs posted, like in a subdivision, for instance, that specifically over this one.
Right,
It's supposed to be 25,
right.
and a subdivision just is 25, so there aren't signs posted. But if we want to post extra signage, and that's true for dirt roads as well, so it's basically the same situation, subdivisions, dirt roads.
So like mine, where they do 70?
Exactly, Anderson, yeah, where they fly down it. It's the same type of thing, and we really don't need a speed study, because we're not trying to decrease the speed, which would just increase the speed, but extra postage would work pretty well. Now, I've talked to the road commission about it, and essentially we can do that process without triggering a speed study, but there is money. We haven't been budgeting for extra signage. If we get a huge flood of everyone wants to do this, and we end up spending thousands of dollars on this at one time, it may be an issue. But I did get a quote recently for this one subdivision, and I've talked to him several times about this over the last couple of months. But I did get the one quote, and it was just under $500 for a pair of signs. And I talked to him about people that were interested in a subdivision or on the dirt roads paying directly for it. The road commission has no way of accepting money, so it definitely has to come from the township. Lori just signed a renewed contract with the road commission for buying signage. The road commission said if we want to have people pay the township for extra signage, that's completely up to us. It has nothing to do with them at all. And so I think it's reasonable to go either way. If people want extra signage, for the township to budget in doing extra signage, or if people want extra signage for there to be a process for people to essentially apply to the township along with money to get the extra signs. I think either way is reasonable.
And there is a way to accept donations for the signs and whatnot.
Okay.
I know that just by working through the accounts and stuff like that. We do have something where you can actually donate to the township.
We could set it up as a donate, there could be a donation fund, something like that, or there could just be like a fee for if you want extra signage for a pair of signs, it's $500.
Yeah,
Simple, something like that.
We could put a line item for
Right.
road signage, that's not a big deal, and everything that goes into that comes right out.
And I assume over time, if we're looking a few years down the road, then it probably wouldn't be too much, but we might get right at the beginning a huge rush. I mean, I know Gerald would like one on his road, there's this other subdivision, there's another subdivision, so there's probably a handful that I know about. So there might be a rush right off the bat that would then probably slow down.
Because I think our street needs a sign, because the people, I've had buses that drive by our street, I'm from a house there, not doing 25.
Right.
I know it's 25.
Right.
I'm game for it.
I think it makes sense. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns? All right, meeting conduct and structure. So obviously, I like a decently loose meeting. I've run different types of organizations, and we've had different levels of structure. I've run a very structured and tight meeting before, where someone speaks at a turn, I tell them to stop talking and talk when they're supposed to. I haven't run this like that. There is a difference also, I think, between the size of the meeting, the people in attendance, like we have 2 public here, not a big deal. All right, if things get crazy and everyone's talking at the same time,
They get pretty rowdy though, I've seen it.
it's not that bad.
Yeah, they do.
If we have 25 people here, it's a little different, so I can still kind of play that by ear. And then working sessions, I do kind of like the conversational feel for it, and we're not making motions, passing something. But I think I've probably been letting it go too much, but I need feedback on this. On regular meetings, especially, I especially think with Lori, because I know she does the minutes. In the minutes, especially if I'm allowing public to talk out of turn, the minutes to record are essentially impossible.
They're lost.
Yes. So that's very difficult. So I'm looking for feedback on how much I should tighten it up and in which situation.
I just a note. When we do virtual meeting, they raise their hand, allow them to speak. There's not a lot of people, someone can't talk over someone.
Right.
So I would like to see a little more structure on these with that as a, because I like that people can pay attention and be in those and not have to, we don't hear the background noises and stuff. But I don't know why people would be upset about that. And also to have noticed that, I don't think, maybe I could count on one hand how many times I've heard a person actually come up there say their name and their address.
Most of the time I know them.
Right,
Yeah, same here.
which is great for a small town, Well, like when we had our Hidden Creek Farm, woohoo,
I know.
party, that was crazy.
Yeah.
You know, but that one would definitely need to be more structured, like you said, because there's a lot more people. So it does depend on how many people that are here.
Right.
It kind of changes.
Well, and I think the nice thing is, I mean, we do have, in every meeting, you have 2 public comments.
Right.
Unless it's a hot topic, I mean, I think the public comment should be enough. Now, it's really up to Jeff if he thinks, you know, that it's an issue where we want to hear from the public. Great, we can do that, but you need to shut it down sometimes.
Right.
And if you like, I'll hit throw things at you. Because it can, I mean, and it's not you, it's just the nature of a group.
Yeah.
It is, and I
If
really
it
kind of
will
like,
start and it'll get out of hand.
I like a British House of Commons feel. We're obviously not set up. If we had a little stadium set up on this side, a little stadium set up on this side, we had a chairperson up here,
Yep.
and we really debated stuff, I think that would be better, but we're probably not doing that. I'd also like to eliminate this floor, because it really messes up my spine in a meeting, so I could stand up here and we could just have lecterns.
Yep.
But those are all decently big projects, and we're probably not going to do those. So, I think, but I've let them definitely get too much. They've almost become Viking Norse-style meetings, and I think those are fun.
Sure you do.
But I can look at other people, and I can tell that other people probably disagree. So I'm definitely going to tighten it up in the regular meetings, and I think specifically, we have an issue with probably fear. I think there's a certain level of fear, because I invite people to come up to the lectern, and people are like, And I think they're afraid of going up there. We all know that public speaking rates a lot of times in polls is a greater fear than death and this type of thing. And I think, so we're getting that issue. I don't really know how to resolve that. We could have a public speaking training session. I've done public speaking training for a lot of people.
I would just state at the beginning of the meeting, the purpose of that is for her to be able to hear where people are from and what they're stating, or we can't have proper minutes for our meeting.
Can't go back.
And people need to understand that, and if they have the understanding of it,
Maybe
It
Their fear a
removes the
little bit.
fear. It
And
removes the
you
fear.
know, and I don't
That's
have a
true.
problem if I can hear people, if they stand where they're sitting, or, you know, wherever they are. I don't have a problem with that, as long as I can hear what they're saying.
Well, and the issue we
Because
get
I
with
don't need a
that
microphone.
is we end up with a discussion. Right now, our public having a discussion isn't too big of a deal, but if you have a lot of people, ending up with a discussion is a major issue.
Exactly.
Which is why we ended up, in the virtual meetings, we ended up with people wanting to public comment multiple times.
Yeah.
And I thought it was fine, because if someone forgot something, I want them to be able to say it, I don't want to shut people down. If we were in a highly structured business meeting, I would have said no, and then afterwards, we would have had a review and said you were doing your job improperly. When you speak, say what you intend to speak, because then you're done. But, because there's a political office and I want people to be able to say what they want, then I allowed it to go. But then it ends up as this discussion that's antagonistic. So I think you can speak one time during the first public comment, you can speak one time during the second public comments. You have to go up to the lectern, probably reasonable.
Just as an ADA thing, that's really high.
Hmm.
And if someone would come in a,
Yeah,
just using it as an example,
We have to make reasonable accommodations that goes up and down.
Yeah, it does.
which, but I was
And
getting ready to a
adjustment.
point. My point was, if people are, that's intimidating,
Right.
is there a possibility that we could have a person bring it to them?
That's wireless, yeah, we just pick it up, mark it over.
So if, and then there's, it's like when you're in kindergarten class and you cannot talk until you have the talking stick.
It's
So
an
you
interesting
have people
option.
talking over each other. Sorry, had to bring it back to kindergarten. But I'm just saying, because we did have some people that were debating.
Right.
And that's not what that's not acceptable.
Right, and I think what would happen there, I like the idea of going to the lectern more, because
I do
it's
too.
a lot more clear cut.
I do too,
It's, it's more objective, I would say, and logistically, it's a lot easier.
yes.
And then, also, like, right now, I would have no problem if someone is like, I hate this. This meeting conduct, conversation is horrible in the public. And then a handful of people wanted to speak about different things, and we kind of want to debate it as this huge thing. I think it'd be fine in a working session, because we're not making a motion, we're not making a decision, we're not making a law, we're not doing anything, we're not spending money. But in the actual business meeting, it needs to be different, and I don't think I've separated those now. Does that make sense?
I think that past history has always been people just speak.
Right.
I don't think you just said, I'm gonna speak. No, shut up, you don't have a chance, public comment, that's it. You don't need to interject, and that's what the gavel needs to be for.
You need to teach you how to get that.
I like the Lindsay, but when they wanna start talking, no, shut up, speak.
Don't pull out the whip.
Yeah,
That's too far.
I don't particularly like the gavel.
I don't either, but instead of saying is that we had to, and same thing with that's why we bought the hour, remember how pain in the butt was to find that stupid hourglass?
Oh, yeah, we had,
Is that
it's a 3-minute time.
It's 3 minutes, yeah.
That's what
And
we
as soon
see.
as they walk up, as soon as they walk up, turn
and
it over,
say their
as soon
name,
as it's over,
flip it over.
sit down.
Yep,
Right.
yep. that's-
But unfortunately,
commission
we
meeting.
never,
They do
we,
that.
Yeah,
it was like that when I
and
first started, and then it went to,
they're strict on
who
that.
cares, and then it went to, we'll try, and then it went to, who cares, and then it went to,
Yeah, I'll tighten it up. I've had it tightened up.
I don't think
around
it's a
the
bad
meetings
issue,
before.
I just think when we have, I'll use the last meeting, well, I don't like this road thing, I don't like this road, okay, shut it,
Right.
you know, or the annual meeting, shut it.
Yeah, well, the annual meeting, see, there's
That
certain
was different, I
things,
get that, but
Right.
still, the same point.
because everyone was elected.
Right, but you know, if you don't, we're not talking about it, so you can't talk about it.
Right.
So when we get to talking about it, you can talk about it. We didn't start
We're
talking
not
about
there yet.
fireworks, we're not there yet, right? We're waiting until we get to that point. So
Right.
don't bring it up unless, again, if you have something on the agenda, here it is, speak. If not, you're done.
Right.
Get to the next one, well, I want to speak now. No, you had your chance and you chose not to.
Right, be prepared enough
Right.
to write some notes down on a piece of paper or something.
Right. And I think that would tighten it up a little more.
Right. And I get people forgetting, they're like, oh, I wanted to say the thing, but we do have 2 public comment sections. We don't have to. We only have to have one.
Oh, yeah.
But I think having one at the beginning and one at the end makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Every board I sit on is,
Yep.
you go to every board I sit on, every state board I sit on, even, is one in the beginning, one in the end. And the good guys come back and go, hey, I forgot, and I misunderstood, they're perfect, no problem.
Right.
Hey, but you got 3 minutes,
Right.
and you gotta yield your time back. If you don't, they just,
Right.
they turn it right down.
They just turn off the microphone.
Yeah, they're usually,
We're done.
all they want. and everybody listens.
And if you're consistent, the people out here know exactly.
Right, so we just have a process.
Right,
Yeah.
then they know.
Right.
And get it, right? I mean, think about
You
it.
gotta control Jeffrey, use that little hammer.
Throw it out.
Back
I mean,
when the last
it
ordinance
represents-
came in, I don't remember how.
Not on the head, just on
The power to punish physically through
Well,
violence.
it was brutal, it was,
Right,
I'm not
because
saying
when
they
they-
were bad,
Right.
it's just they didn't know.
Stand out here and argue with it when the meeting's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it could be that we need to do something because it has gotten so rowdy that just in one meeting, I'll have to get up and, I mentioned in the one meeting that I would come down and escort someone up to the lectern if that needed to occur. Ideally, it would not, but I think that would resolve it pretty soon, or it would become a small disaster. One of the two, but it would get resolved.
Well, if you have to though, that little hammer is when it sets order. They know you got their attention.
Right.
But part of it is also, like you're talking about at the last meeting, you get them, they're supposed to be walking up to you because they're supposed to be addressing you, not
Each other.
debating each other out here, you know.
They take that outside.
Right.
Well, right, and yeah, I mean, Robert's Rules of Orders, we essentially can use it as a guideline or as little of a guideline as we want. And in a really tight form of Robert Rules of Orders, no one is allowed to speak to anyone except for the chair, which would be me in this case. So everyone has to address me, which I think it's reasonable for the board to address the board and for the people that come up for public comment to address the board. And specifically, if they're trying to make a case on something, to speak so that everyone's hearing and make their case for private roads being bad or private roads being good, or whatever the case may be. I think that's relatively reasonable. But if you get crosstalk between person and person out in the audience and you have a large audience, then it can obviously go to mayhem very quickly.
That's, wow.
I agree.
We're dueling neighbors.
Or dueling neighbors. That just applies in every situation. Any other comments on that? No? All right, fireworks. The basic fireworks situation I hear has gone poorly. The township has very little to do with it. Basically, they have to turn in their proof of insurance and their state license for the person that's doing the fireworks to.
Whoever, yeah, the pyrotechnic company needs to turn in to me their state license and a certificate of liability insurance. And then they're set to go. I have yet to see that.
And then normally
I
it
don't know.
goes.
Are you on the fireworks committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, so whoever's doing the fireworks, they need to get to the state and get that license and get me their
Well,
certificate.
yeah, Wolverine does that.
Is it Wolverine doing it
We
again?
had a big turnover on the fireworks.
I know that's
We're
it,
still
yeah.
trying to
that
find out
was
who's gonna lead this group.
Right, it changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I get, it's a volunteer organization, and
Yeah.
I've been in volunteer
Well, we have it,
organizations.
yeah, we
so-
have it set up.
Do
We
you?
just have to get the actual, you
Yeah,
know.
so whoever, if it's Wolverine doing it again, just,
Yeah.
have him get with me.
Yeah,
That's
I
all
know.
I'm waiting for.
I know, yeah.
And I think normally approval passes through the board. I don't think we're gonna get any resistance to fireworks on the board. We're just waiting for the stuff so that we can approve it.
Yeah.
And I've given permission to multiple people in multiple ways to get me stuff, and no stuff has come.
Yeah. I think our next meeting is May 5th or something.
I think it's May 5th.
We have a lot going on. We have a
The
lot.
day
of
after
things
the
we're
election.
doing.
You better be a day after.
Yeah,
We better be here.
we'll be here. Yeah.
We're working.
We're on the committee, and we don't even know when the next meeting is.
No.
I didn't know about the last one.
Yeah, it's a difficult volunteer organization, and really someone has to have a lot of initiative to try to lead something like that, and it's been really well done from an outsider perspective in the past, like fireworks in Twin Lake are great. They're well done, so hopefully that continues to go well.
Kathy's retired now, so.
Right, yeah, that happens. Anything else on fireworks? Lake setback and view preservation ordinance. Now this has specifically been an issue with properties specifically on North Lake. But it made me look in a detailed way at the ordinance and then contact various people. Now previously, the township did not have a district for zoning specifically around the lakes. Now we have the Lake Residential Zoning District specifically for that. The reason that was created in 2019 is because there was a 100-foot setback essentially for doing anything on the lakes. It's difficult to meet that on those lakes, so they had tons of stuff coming to the zoning board of appeals. Basically, if you wanted to build something on a lake, you came to the zoning board of appeals for a variance. If you have the same variance occurring over and over and over, it means something's wrong with your ordinance. So they created the Lake Residential Zoning District in 2019. I think that is a good idea.
Yep.
I think some of the things in it are probably bad. Well, I know they're bad. Because we have this view preservation ordinance, which I think sounds like a great idea. Because people don't want things obscured. But in the ordinance, we pulled directly from Grand Haven Township's ordinances, our language, and it says unduly obscure view. Right? You can't unduly obscure view. Now, how you would define unduly obscure view is very difficult. To make that in any way, shape, or form objective is very difficult. I've looked at, if you take the door closest to the lake, you take a picture and then calculate the percentage of the lake that is blocked, something like this, very difficult and really impossible to do on a level of complexity. I was trying to preserve the view preservation ordinance. But in the end, I talked to Grand Haven. They said they don't have very much trouble with this ordinance because theirs is mostly along Lake Michigan, and you have to go through the state to do something on it. You have to get permits from Eagle. If someone puts up like a gazebo, or they do some stuff on the river, things like that, they actually do run into issues with it. I talked to the zoning person from Fremont, so the city of Fremont and Dalton Township and Sheridan Charter Township, they try to do their zoning in conjunction with each other. And they don't have anything like that at all, so they don't have any issues with it. The setbacks themselves, so on the lakefront, from the water, there's a 20-foot setback of where you can build any kind of fence. Now, that's very reasonable because I know Dalton Township has had issues in the past where people build fences right down into the water. You can't do that. It's bad in a bunch of different ways for people accessing the water and that type of thing, but it's also bad for the water itself, the water quality, and which is obviously a concern, and trying to deal with that is interesting. There's too much phosphorus in the lakes, which is part of the ride drainage, trying to process that out so we can donate land for switchbacks, so that's all good. I had someone contact me yesterday about banning boats on the lakes. I said that that's probably not going to happen.
We need to move.
So, but I did inquire into the company that tests the water, PLM, Professional Lake Management, and they do all the tests. They report them to us about levels of bacteria, all this type of stuff, so it is kept track of. I specifically sent an email inquiring into the level of oil or gas in the lake, and if they test for that, and to check into it. But my email conversation with the woman that said that did not go well yesterday. And I was trying to do that zoning course from Michigan State University too, so it's an interesting day. But anyways, on these setbacks, so you have that 20-foot setback, which is really good. And then from there, you can build a 4-foot high, 90% visibility fence, like chain link or wrought iron, something like that, up to 60 feet off the lake. So you essentially have 40 feet that you can have a fence like this. Now, starting 60 feet off the lake, it specifically addresses fences and walls. And that's your front yard setback line, although there's some language about building up to someone else's eave on a neighboring property. So there's some different stuff there. But essentially, it would appear to me that, well, also on the unduly obscure view, there's no way that holds up in court.
Nope.
It's not even going to be close. It's so vague and subjective.
You got
that it's
trees,
not.
I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah. I mean, one of our lights going wrong?
It's nice.
But essentially, that we have the objective part with the 60-foot setback for a 6-foot high fence, solid fence. So the objective part is going to override the subjective part. And if we went by the subjective part, essentially myself and the zoning administrator would have to go out to every property every time someone wanted to do something and say, oh, we like this, or we don't like this, which that's not going to work. That's not a good plan. So, because those are all going to end up in court anyways. So essentially, this just needs to be cleaned up because it's only not quite survived 2 years and there's already a major issue with it. I see more issues moving forward. And the view is already preserved for those front 60 feet to a decent extent, so which I think is solid. And that's the way to implement view preservation ordinances, not through saying that you just can't obscure someone's view because then everything gets debatable. Questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns?
We dealt with this 100%, living where we are. We had to be very careful about, Tina was so sick and tired of hearing us. We were on a first name basis, like she didn't even have to know her name, she knew my voice. But it's worked out, but we followed all of the stipulations. Our neighbors were not happy with us in the beginning, but now we're friends, thank God. And it was difficult trying to make sure you walk the line. Those lakefront properties are really,
They're unique.
Yes.
They're unique.
You also have to consider the ones who have property, their beaches across the street. There's several sections of that on every lake.
Right, that's true.
And, you know, that's been a big issue about sheds being built on, because it's a narrow beach, depending on what the water level is.
Right.
From the road to the lake. I mean, ours is anywhere from 40 feet to 70, 100 feet, depending on how high the water is. So, when you get people building sheds on, it's kind of a,
And ideally, moving forward now, as far as, because measuring where the water actually is, so how far is your setback, is an issue. Now, with those lakes, because they did that big project in 1984 with a ride drain, lake level outlet, 2 channels connecting those lakes, and North Lake mostly fluctuates according to those other lake levels as well, because it's connected underground naturally, then really, if that system is working right, which it should from here on, then the lake should be more consistent. Now, Mother Nature obviously has her fluctuations and her whimsy, and it depends on how much rain we're getting and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it shouldn't have the huge fluctuations that we've seen over the last couple of years, ideally. So we should have a more objective lake level, because it's those measurements. I talked about them in the lake level outlet device section. That objective level was set, so hopefully that will maintain. And we had, in the end of March, we had Twin Lakes surveyed for the lake level outlet device on its level, and it was a very small amount off. It was 0.13 feet off of where it should be for winter levels, and so it's essentially right on where it's supposed to be at this time. So people are saying the lake is going a long ways down. This is where the lake should be at this time.
and people were told that when the drain project was going in, but a lot of people chose not to really. I mean, we talked about it many times that we're gonna have a beach that we haven't had in a long time.
Right.
And, but people still freak out because they're used to the level being like this in August, not in the spring.
Be it done in May.
And now they're worried like, you know, is the lake gonna dry up?
Right.
But, you know, I mean, there has been years.
Oh, yeah.
And on Middle Lake especially, you know, where they had, you know, you know, there was at least 50, 60 more feet of beach, you know, way
Right.
back in the day when the water really did fluctuate a lot more, before they put the drains in.
Yeah, that's a lot. And I
Yeah.
inquired into that. If something went wrong with the lake level outlet device, and it shouldn't now that we're gonna have a new one, it should be good for a long time. But if it was just gone, with the lakes just
Right.
drain away, and they said they wouldn't completely drain out, they would
No.
drop a ways,
Yeah,
but they wouldn't just go away.
right.
So, which,
People just getting there, last year was, the water was up over the grat and up, you know, and then this year it's like the water's too low, so that's just the way it goes.
yeah, the lakes fluctuate. And front, the lake side of the lake property is considered a front yard. And so basically, lake properties end up with 2 front yards, which is unusual, and it's unusual for all of their zoning, which is why they're a separate lake zoning district. Once you get into the accessory buildings, you get into fences, you get into all sorts of stuff. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns? We're gonna have to fix the audio at some point, I don't know what's currently.
gremlins. Give them water.
Oh, yeah, I think it's yours, that's loose.
All down.
Technical issue.
There you go.
Next, we have the farming ordinance. Now, specifically on this, it's just a thing I want to dig into. This is probably going to be, well, we have several very complex things in here, but this is definitely going to be on the higher side. So, just like I said, I completed that zoning course over the last 2 days. That had some information on this, but not a ton. But I have 2 separate binders, 3-ring binders, specifically from Michigan State University, their extension program, on zoning, specifically on farm zoning. And so it is a quite complex thing. Now, cities have figured out how to do urban zoning for urban farming, this type of thing. usually don't have to address it too much in a rural area. Because Dalton is transitioning from a lot of rural to more of an urban environment, we're getting more subdivisions, people closer to each other, this type of thing, and we're getting this transition and a little bit of a culture clash, then managing this through this growing stage is essentially a big thing to work out. I'm going to do the Master Citizen Planner program through Michigan State University over the next 6 months. I'm debating on which project I want to do. As part of that, you do a major project. And I'm debating which project to do. It might be the enforcement process, it might be the farming ordinance. One of these things I'm going to take and I'm going to throw a lot of time and effort into. This might be one of them, but if not, this will still be a project that we want to essentially work out over the next couple of years so that it works. Questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns?
No, I think it's a good issue to look into.
I don't know. I guess I just,
No comment from the
No
farm.
control on the barn.
I just want to know more about it, I guess, but I guess as we go on, we'll know. See like what it all entails.
Yeah, and you being on the planning commission, you'll see more and you'll get more information, and I can get you copies. I think did I already email you?
You sent me the.
I already emailed you
I
the
think
two
the planning and
binders.
zoning, yeah, I think you sent me both of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
I look at them for a little bit.
It's a lot of
I'm looking at a
information.
lot of stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
Here
info.
and the planning commission.
That's for sure. Anything else? Camping ordinance. So we've had several different inquiries into this. The only thing we have for camping, which I've heard was specifically brought up for lake issues, is where people own a piece of property and they want to park an RV on it. And this is specifically written in such a way that you need an adjacent property that you can go to use the facilities and that type of thing. And this works in those types of situations because usually you're getting, like for properties obviously quite limited, there are a lot of times tiny lots and someone will own a lot across the street, something like this, they'll park an RV there just for the summer because more people are staying, so it's set up as camping, they get a permit through Lorraine, works out fine, they go in the house to use water and restrooms and all this type of thing. That's the only thing we have on camping, so it really doesn't address any more rural type of camping, it doesn't address hunting cabins, which we've had a number of inquiries about, and that type of thing. It can be quite the issue to work out because you run into the problem of if you make it in such a way that someone is just trying to live for years in a tent, then you bring up sanitary issues with the county health department and this type of thing. So it can be a little bit to work out, but I think it's reasonable to look at something and work on working it out. Questions, thoughts, comments?
Question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So boondocking, so if you owned 10 acres, 5 acres, whatever in it, and it had some kind of lake access to it, or didn't, even for that matter, in Dalton Township, and you had an RV, you can't park and camp on it.
No, not current.
Not currently. You have to have access
I
to an adjacent.
bought my camper, put it in my driveway, and couldn't stay. Put
Now,
it
how
up.
can we change that? That is just not right.
You rewrite the ordinance.
That needs to be rewritten, that's just wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So
we
many
essentially
levels.
will make an ordinance covering it specifically. And we're gonna have to look
But I don't
at,
think people should be living in campers either.
well, we're gonna look at what kind of limitations
Well,
to
and
put.
there are, if you look at a lot of places like, we own property in Mason County, if you have property, you can stay in a camper in Mason County and we have 90 days, but it has to be self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
you have to make sure that there's
There's
proper
sewage and-
water and
yep,
septic.
Yep.
And that's just something to look at, and I think that if we look at areas where there are large tracts of property where people camp, and look at their ordinances, I think that's maybe the way to go to start.
Right.
Agreed. And I know
Because-
the village of Lakewood Club is like, you can have a camper, on your property, you can actually stay in the camper for 7 days.
Okay.
And that's-
And yeah, and well,
that's
that's,
it.
it's 30 days, it's 30 days, you can,
For the
you can
village?
put, yeah,
No, for
not, no, for the
For
township,
Dalton
yeah.
Township, okay.
So, but I think it is something to look into, but we want to make sure that people are not living in campers year-round, and they have proper sanitation and that kind of thing, but you can ordinance people to that, I agree. But you need to make sure that they and their neighbors are Because it's not only, if you don't have proper sanitation, it's not only you that you're affecting, it's your neighbors.
Exactly, exactly.
Well, that's where you run into the same issue we have with like building codes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because what are people expecting when it transitions owners? If you have something that's
Yeah.
not built to code and then it burns down later,
Yeah.
and do they have a reasonable expectation when they're buying a house for it to be to a certain code? That's how those things are usually defended from a rights perspective. And it's the same type of thing on some of the property. You can't illegally be dumping chemicals on your property because that is going to be a major problem for neighbors and in the future. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns? Next, we have the road maintenance contract. So I just included this because essentially we obviously have our issues with the road commission, but we also work on working with them, just like with the extra signage and like this maintenance contract. So specifically on this was part of a 2-year initiative to work on certain roads in Dalton, which I think was a decent idea of investing some money into the infrastructure. Those were done last year. This is the follow-up to those. I believe it's the normal contract that the road commission signs with everyone that they do work with. They just fill in different roads and different numbers. And so I just wanted to include it to look at, but I'll bring it up for vote at the May 10th meeting. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns?
And this money is already budgeted in the budget for this year, so, and we plan on that. So.
Next, we have, last item, the horse trail market. So the last couple of years, they have been looking at potentially doing something with the horse trail in this direction of getting proper signage. I worked with Melissa Johnson, and she's been very helpful, kind of leads the initiative on the horse trail, and she's been kind of put off repeatedly over the last few years on this. So right now, we're in the process, the deputy treasurer is in the process of ordering the signs that Dehan Johnson has recommended. And I got together with her and the maintenance department, because this is one of those things where if we're putting more on the maintenance department than already not keeping up, that's a bad plan. And obviously, over the last handful of months that I've been in office, I've almost 100% focused on management issues. I have not focused on politics because there's a lot of stuff that just has to be managed. You have to have a strong base of management before you get into other things. And this is one of those. So I met with her, and she said there is an organization that is recent in the county, and they're working on horse trails and this type of thing. So we're working on buying these, and it was a few $100s. It wasn't bad at all for markers for this entire trail. I think it was less than $200. And then our maintenance department is going to put up a sign at the beginning. This was originally in 1990 a Boy Scout project. The township was owned for a long time, but it was a Boy Scout project in 1990. And she refurbed one of the signs that was original in rough shape, so that's in the parking lot. And maintenance is going to put that in. But specifically for trail markers on trees, we'll get the stuff, but her organizations, volunteers will go out. It's not like maintenance knows exactly what the trail should be marked as anyways.
Exactly.
And so they're going to go out and mark those trails the way they should
That's
be.
cool.
There are some trails, I included this map, we got a little map with some of my own handwriting on it. And there are certain sections where you see there's a little circle with the cross through it for not going here essentially. There's some lines where she's looking at potentially changing trails so they don't go on someone else's property and so they have better connection points. But some of these spots, adjacent property owners, they come in off their own property on the horse trail, which is reasonable. If I had a trail in my backyard, I would probably walk to it off my property too. And then there ends up being a trail there, so it looks like a trail. So someone's riding along, they see a trail goes in that direction, they end up at someone's house. And so we're getting signs to mark those that are just going to be an image of a horse with a line through it that means don't go this way, and to better designate that. But I think that's a good balance between having the volunteer organization do some stuff, having the township provide some of the equipment, and do some of the stuff closer near the parking lot, but in a limited capacity, something like that.
I had someone also email me last week about the trails out there being used by motor vehicles.
Right.
They're also asking if we can look into putting up those pillars where so vehicles cannot drive up on those equestrian trails because people have been driving vehicles or off-road vehicles on those trails.
Right.
And they're causing damage So of course, someone's trying to ride their horse out there and they got a four-wheeler coming down there. That could be bad.
That can get ugly quick.
So the trail, where's the horse gotta go? So, I think it's a serious issue, we should look into it. And get more information about the costs, about closing those trails off to make sure that no more vehicles are going down those trails.
And Gerald had brought up a specific type of gate before, all right, that allows horses to go over, the horse can step over something, but a lot of things can't ride over something without destroying the gate, so we could obviously destroy the gate, break it down, go around it, something like that. But nevertheless, there is a gate in that fashion. I think you get into some decent pricing, so I think it's worth considering on whether the volunteer organization should be trying to raise funds to put in something like that, if maintenance should be putting it in, or whether the township should just be giving permission for that to happen, and then for them to carry forward with it. On what that balance should be essentially.
Something,
Yeah.
this is something.
They're about $400 to $500, but
It's like an needle, it's like a needle.
Yeah.
that's kind of what they look like.
So it's a gate essentially like that, so a horse can step through in the middle.
Okay,
Right.
oh, that's cool.
Are there only 2 entrances into the trails from the parking lot, or 3?
Which technically one off, one technically up the belt, that's
They
off the
run
water
like
hall.
$400 to $500,
Yeah, I'm not
but
sure.
the way I look at it is, if the users of the equestrian trail would like something like that, I have no problem with like going, okay, you know, we can send maintenance out there to install it, whatnot, but it's only $400 or $500, you know, do a pop can drive or something like that, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Get 2
Donate
gates.
something.
Biggest issue I had is to make sure that we have access to be able to get in there. They're the first ones to bitch at us, they couldn't get to us because we got a gate in the way.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, we need fire access for sure.
Make sure we can get us in there, we've worked that all right.
Well, I think they would probably have,
That's interesting.
I think they close and have, do they normally have like a chain with?
Yeah,
access?
typically it's got a sliding aspect, technically.
Okay.
I don't care.
Right, just, yeah, cut the line as fast and easy.
The ballards, if you put ballards up, then we're gonna have to get the folding ballards, those cost a lot more, you got dumping in the cement, so.
Okay,
Those
so
are
the gate would be logistically easier.
probably be easier, as long as it's a true hinge, yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
but yeah, as long as it's a true hinge gate, we have access to it, we don't,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So
easy.
if they have to get back, then
Yeah,
it's true.
we've had to go back there once, twice. But that was on the Belfast side, and that was where the old homeowner just put a bunch of trees down.
Oh.
So he made his own block, so
Sure. That becomes more difficult.
now we just cut it. We just
Right.
cut the trees up.
Me and Lee use stock gates all the time at our place. When
Right, yeah.
our average stock gate is,
Yeah.
what, $150? something like
Yeah,
that?
$200.
Yeah,
For-
it's like
for expensive
I
one?
mean, even for like a, yeah, it's like $150 for 12 footer with the length mentioned. It's like $100 for 1 hour. I bought it.
I bought too many.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns, Horse Trail? No? All right, we are to second public comments. Public comments? No? Board comments?
Board comment, if this meeting takes 2.5 hours, how can we do this meeting before the other meeting?
Well, I'll have to tighten it up. So essentially, I'll have to get a feel of how much information I can include for an hour discussion before the other meeting.
Okay,
And obviously, I've been quite aggressive in bringing a lot of stuff to the board's attention, things that I think need attention.
yeah,
But I can get a feel for that, and I think that'll be fine. I have to lessen up the workload anyways, working extended hours all week, and then extra hours on the weekend every weekend isn't gonna work for me personally forever. Anyways, it kinda works for Chief Styles, but,
He lives here
I
anyway.
think the thing is,
Okay.
if we start doing these if we start doing work sessions before
We'll
every
be up
board
on it.
meeting,
Right.
this
Yeah.
will shrink way down.
Right.
So, yeah, I
We're
think
playing
that,
catch up right now.
yeah, exactly. I think in the long run, this is all gonna be a lot.
yeah, so I think that's what
Yeah,
I'm
that'd be good for your fun.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
gavel time.
Yeah, I think we're good. We don't even need a motion to adjourn. I will declare this adjourned.
Go.